Hi, folks. Yes, we are going to call this meeting to order. There's a large number of people here, and which is certainly absolutely welcome. We are here tonight to discuss our ongoing efforts to amend and revise and update our official plan and zoning and development bylaw. Joining us this evening is Upland Planning and Design, represented by Mr. Ian Watson to my far right, who will present the most recent draft of the official plan and zoning development bylaw. I just want to indicate at the outset that I recognize through a large number of correspondence that I personally have received, as well as some of my colleagues have received on council, that many of you may be here tonight to discuss a proposed subdivision in the Foxwoods area, so-called Phase 3 of that subdivision. I just want to let everybody know that that subdivision is not the subject of this public meeting. Under our zoning and development bylaws, subdivision agreements are not subject to public meetings. We cannot legally impose more onerous processes upon a developer that do not exist in the bylaw. That being said, if there are elements of a proposed subdivision or anything with respect to zoning and development within the municipality, we will absolutely hear from you as it relates to, in general, comments on zoning and development and our specific bylaw. I would appreciate it if the comments are directed towards me as chair, and I will decide who answers those questions. If it gets into the specifics of a proposed subdivision, we will not hear from you. If it is with respect to elements of any proposed subdivision, specifically as it relates to technical elements of zoning, what lands may be zoned in what fashion, building types, minimum building sizes, roof design, architectural elements, we will absolutely hear from you. I just want to put that out at the outset, okay? So I don't want to disappoint anybody if we get into this meeting and there's a difference in expectations. So with that in mind, I would say that the reason we are here is because we are legally obligated through time to amend our official plan and zoning and development bylaw. Pursuant to the Planning Act of PEI, municipalities are required to review their official plans and bylaws at intervals of no more than 5 years. Our previous review was completed in 2014 and approved by the Minister of Finance, Energy and Municipal Affairs in 2015. As we can all appreciate and understand, a lot was happening in and around February of 2020, and as such, we are somewhat out of date. Both documents are now due for review and update. The proposed planning documents have been developed over the past 22 months through a comprehensive review of town policies, stakeholder input, and public engagement. During the most recent engagement phase from May 29th to July 12th, residents had the opportunity to review the draft documents, submit comments and feedback on the online zoning map, speak with the project team, and attend an open house. At the most recent July 27th Planning Development and Heritage Committee meeting, Upland Designs presented the What We Heard report from the latest engagement. Throughout this month, planning staff and Upland have met with council to resolve some questions council had with the most recent draft. The documents that we will present to you tonight represent the commitment that this project team has made to listen to you all as the community and to develop a new official plan and zoning and development bylaw that reflects your hopes, your desires, and your expectations of what this community will look like and what it will mean to live within it. After the new documents have been presented, there will be an open floor for any last questions or comments. Questions via social media are going to be monitored and submitted to be read into the record and answered. To ask a question, please use the comment field on either YouTube or Facebook where you're viewing the live stream. As this is a public meeting, you are required to provide your name and address when asking a question. For the record, this meeting has been advertised on August the 18th and 22nd within the Guardian newspaper. Notifications of the documents have been posted online, and the public meeting has been shared on the town social media pages. Before we get into the actual presentation, as I indicated at the outset, comments and presentations should focus on the nature of the merits or likely consequences of the proposed amendments to the official plan and zoning and development bylaw. Must avoid personalities of any proponents or motives of those people. Comments should be focused on the amendments at hand and not on ancillary matters such as the aforementioned subdivision. All comments and questions are made to myself as chair, who will then decide who is responsible or best positioned to answer that question. There will be no direct debate between you all as members of the audience. Members attending this meeting should refrain from disturbing the assembly when presentations are being made or questions are being discussed. As we have a large number of people here, in the interest of time, I will be limiting questions and presentations to 5 minutes for individuals, or if the group is identified, I will provide some additional time. I will now take the opportunity to ask Mr. Ian Watson of Upland Design to present a summary of what we have heard to date and an overview of the proposed official plan, as well as some of the highlights of our zoning and development bylaw in its most recent iteration.
Test, test, test. Do I have to, is that coming through? Test, test, test. You hear that okay? Yeah, perfect, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Ian Watson, Senior Planner with Upland Planning and Design, and we've been working with the town over the past almost 2 years now on the update to the official plan and zoning and development bylaw. So this is the public meeting, public hearing for the project. So it's a little more formal than, I see many familiar faces here tonight, and this is a little more formal than you would expect from previous engagements that you may have attended. But I'm going to give a little overview of the project just so any new faces here tonight know what's happened to date and how we got to where we are. And then highlight in really broad terms what is in these documents that are being proposed, as well as some of the key changes that have been made since the second public draft that many of you would have participated with on in the last iteration. And then this being the public hearing, really the purpose of tonight is for the planning committee and council to hear your feedback directly on the documents themselves before they go through the formal adoption process. So, as Councillor MacDonald outlined to begin with, the town of Stratford currently has an official plan and a zoning development bylaw. They are from 2014 and 2019 respectively, and there have been amendments along the way, but in Prince Edward Island you typically review these planning documents on a 5 to 10 year cycle because things change. A lot changes in 10 years from in terms of development, demographics, economy, and your plans need to keep up with that. So as I said, we have been working on this for almost 2 years now, starting in September 2024, launching the project. We were here at Harvest Fest way back when. And then through a number of rounds of engagement, community visioning, talking about issues and options, and then drafting the documents, and then 2 rounds of draft engagement. We are here, very close to the finish line in that formal adoption phase, and there are some kind of formal legislated steps that happen to go through this process. That includes this public meeting tonight, and then planning committee makes a recommendation to council, and then council has a formal process to give readings and adopt the proposed documents. So just wanted to highlight that engagement piece. There has been a lot of work done on this over the last 2 years, starting with that formative launch engagement with an online launch meeting, in-person launch meetings, stakeholder sessions, council and committee sessions, surveys. And that was very big picture visioning. Who are we as a community and what do we want to be? Then early in 2025, we drilled down into some key topics to talk about what are the issues and what are some of the ideas that you have as a community for tackling those issues. So things like housing, employment lands, agriculture, really getting into the making some key decisions about what these planning documents could include. We went away and drafted, and then came back in the fall of 2025 with that first public draft to test with you what did we get right, what missed the mark, what needed to change, and we had a lot of really great feedback through online sessions, in-person workshops, stakeholder sessions, feedback forms, all sorts of different methods. Heard a lot about those draft documents and worked with your council, your planning committee, and staff to refine the documents to respond to a lot of what we heard. We then brought that second draft back out in the spring of this year as kind of a final test of A, first of all, to show you what had changed, and B, to get your feedback on those changes. again, heard a lot of feedback, and we have made some adjustments since, which I'm going to highlight tonight. So, as I said, I'm going to touch on these documents very high level in terms of what they contain. At this point, we are 2 years in, and people have been along the way, with us along the way, and have a good sense, but I know there may be new faces, so want to touch on some of those high level things. So, residential planning for residential development was a huge piece of this project. We obviously heard a lot about the need for housing, the need for different types of housing to accommodate different stages of life, different income points, all those sorts of things. So there are a number of kind of key moves in these documents to further diversify and provide housing opportunities within Stratford, while recognizing those existing neighborhoods and the character of those neighborhoods that people bought into or value. So some of the big moves are a new waterfront mixed use zone for the gateway down by the bridge, that all those undeveloped lands or underdeveloped lands, there is a new zone there that allows fairly substantial mixed use development kind of as a gateway to Stratford. We took a really hard look at the residential zone structure in Stratford and simplified that. Stratford had a lot of different residential zones that were very similar in different ways, but added to the overall complexity and made it harder to understand what could happen in your neighborhood. Stratford currently has a sustainable subdivision overlay in its planning documents, so this is a mechanism that had a really good intention at heart, which was to allow additional development density if the proposal could essentially tick boxes in terms of meeting sustainability goals, so higher tree plantings or efficient water use or all sorts of different criteria that could be used to meet sustainability targets and as a trade-off allow additional density. As much as that tool was had a good idea at heart, it has been very challenging to administer. So the draft documents remove that sustainable subdivision overlay and replace it with just regulations for a lot of the good sustainability pieces that were in that tool. There is expanded permission for accessory dwellings in these documents, so your basement suites, your backyard suites, those small units that are gentle density and allow family members or renters to have a small options for housing. And then, of course, short-term rentals, Airbnbs, VRBOs. The town has been working really hard to develop a bylaw to specifically regulate those, and that has been worked into these planning documents. What that residential zoning structure actually means, I mentioned one of the things we've really done is really simplified it. So we've actually taken all the various residential zones in Stratford and boiled it down to 5 residential zones. So the low density residential generally recognizes those existing neighborhoods, areas that were previously zoned R1L or R1 or are currently zoned those things. The narrower lot residential zone still focused on that lower density, single, maybe 2 unit, small townhouse development, but on smaller lots that use land more efficiently, are a little more affordable to develop and can result in more affordable housing. The medium density 1 and medium density 2 zones are somewhat the equivalent, they're kind of the equivalent of the existing R2 zones or planned unit residential zones. Those areas that allow townhouses or for the RM2 zone, stacked townhouses or small, very small multi-unit buildings. And then the residential high density zone is your kind of multi-unit apartment buildings. So there is a new zoning map that goes along with all of that. The areas in that light cream color, which make up the bulk of Stratford's landmass, that is that RL zone, that lower density residential that reflects very much the existing kind of lower density single unit neighborhoods. And then the core areas closer to town, or the areas closer to the core of town in the browns and the oranges. Thank So these cream areas are all the RL. The RN zone is used in very limited places. Here at the top and up in here, and so again that's that new zone that allows slight intensification, but again is very much ground oriented, singles and two unit dwellings. The RM1 is this light orangey color, and it's covering a lot of those neighborhoods that had previously been zoned R2 or planned unit residential or town center residential. Those neighborhoods that were built with townhouses or two unit dwellings. And then the RM2 zone, which allows slightly higher densities, is primarily applied to vacant land next to the community campus, where we expect, there's a lot of amenities that are going to be there, that it helps to have people near those amenities to use them, and a real benefit to the people who live there. And then there's limited areas of RH, residential higher density, on existing apartment buildings. And so essentially that's a zone. We haven't pre-applied it anywhere. It's one that someone would come in and ask for rezoning and go through the council process and public process to apply it somewhere else. So in terms of how things have changed from the second public draft that we brought out in the early spring, there are a number of key changes related to housing. Some are related to accessory dwellings. So again, these documents increase permissions for accessory dwellings, including allowing them in detached buildings. So, you know, a carriage house or a backyard suite, whatever you want to call it. That's been tightened up a little bit in terms of, in the previous draft, you could have an accessory dwelling in the rear yard or the side yard. That is now limited to just the rear yard. Accessory dwellings are also now just limited to single dwelling and double dwelling lots. So in the previous draft, you could have a townhouse, for example, and then an accessory dwelling in the back. That has been tightened up to be just single dwellings or double dwellings that could have an accessory dwelling. The other kind of really big change, I think, in terms of this draft is related to that RN zone, the narrower lot residential. So that zone, previously, it has some limits on if you're building next to existing single detached neighborhoods, that there has to be a transition so that you don't have townhouses or doubles right next to the singles. But also, there had been a previous requirement that if a subdivision had more than 30% of its lots be for duplex or townhouse, that had to go to council for approval. The new draft actually just straight up does not allow subdivisions with more than 30% of the lots for duplexes or townhouses. So the RN zone would allow kind of a light intensification, up to 30% of the lots with the denser development, but there's still that transition requirement to the lower density neighborhoods as well. There's some minor clarifications for lot sizes for double dwellings and increasing the lot sizes for end unit townhouses. And then in the transition to short-term rentals, traditionally planning documents have talked about bed and breakfast. That's what existed before the whole Airbnb thing. There were still provisions for standard or kind of traditional bed and breakfasts that didn't quite align with the bylaw for short-term rentals. So there's been some cleaning up of those provisions and making sure that licensing and stuff still applies. In terms of actual zoning changes, residential zoning changes on the map since the last draft, there's been one which is at the top of St. Catharines Avenue that had previously been proposed as RM1, consistent with the surrounding area. We heard a lot of feedback on that, and council directed a change down to RN, that residential narrower lot zone. So that area would now primarily consist of single units as well as a limited amount of townhouses and doubles, potentially, up to the landowner, of course. Environment, climate change. So a lot of work was done on this topic. We heard a lot about this in the early engagement, the desire for Stratford to be a green community, a sustainable community. So there are a lot of big moves in the documents to allow for things like land protection through a new tool called an ecological protection scheme, a new environmental protection O2 zone that gets applied to a lot of sensitive areas, wetlands, or town land that's intended for conservation. There's tree planting requirements, there's bicycle parking requirements. There's a whole framework in these documents for the protection of the agricultural lands in the town. These lands, they are within a town boundary, and someday, as the town continues to grow, they will probably be needed for development, but there's a whole framework to set them aside until, the rest of the town is developed out, and these lands are really needed before they are developed. Coastal and inland flood mapping, making sure that we're really being aware of some of those hazards and that are going to come with climate change. So there are quite a few changes in the second draft, or in this newest draft, related to environment. They're a little more minor. There's been a number of zoning changes, just catching park locations that we had missed. Minor adjustments to where the O1 and O2 zone were applied. The big change is in those agricultural reserve areas, those agricultural lands. There are thresholds in the official plan for when council would consider development of those. Those thresholds have been made more stringent that we really want to see development in the existing areas, the existing serviced areas of the town before we would consider opening up those agricultural reserve areas for development. Other minor tweaks related to flood risk areas, tree planting requirements, making them more practical. Oh, and then one that we did hear a fair bit about in the last round of engagement was wind power generators. So in the current bylaw, there's a permission for small-scale wind power generators in the R1L zone. That's the residential zone in unserviced areas. That kind of got carried forward into the new RL zone, but because that now applies to serviced areas, there was concern that you could have a 50-foot tall wind turbine in a residential neighborhood. So we've clarified that and separated it out into two different categories, so that those small-scale wind power generators would be located only in the agricultural areas or on large lots in the unserviced areas. Transportation, infrastructure, and public realm. Heard a lot about this over the project as well. Valuing trails, the ability to get around. So there's a lot of work done in these documents to reference parks and transportation goals of the town, strengthen standards for parkland dedication, refine controls for architectural design in the core areas of the town, and then have stronger regulations for pedestrian protection and recognize the town's transit goals. Few minor tweaks here, nothing big since the last draft, just tweaking bicycle parking requirements as well as standards for parking lots and barrier-free parking spaces. Commercial areas and mixed-use development. As I already mentioned, the waterfront mixed-use zone, as much as it's a residential big move, it is also a commercial big move. It encourages mixed-use development in the gateway to the town. There is a new general mixed-use zone that covers a lot of the commercial areas of the town. Again, encouraging commercial development, but also the potential for residential above or behind commercial, have that mixed use, allow for intensification in the core, close to services, close to transportation. In doing so, we've expanded the use of form-based approach to development, so looking at kind of strong controls on the mass of buildings, the height in these areas. Refined the business park zoning to really focus on uses that need to be in a business park and can't be elsewhere. And then put an emphasis on civic and cultural and artistic uses, making sure those are widely permitted throughout the town. Very minor changes here, clarifications for temporary uses is this. And then finally, administration, development process, and definitions. A lot of work in these throughout the project went into making these documents easier to understand, easier to use, clearer for everybody involved. It's in everybody's interest to know what can go on a piece of land. So having really clear application requirements and processes, having prioritization for which lands get developed first, again back in that agricultural piece, being thoughtful about how we grow, reducing the number of zones, moving a lot of uses from special permitted use to permitted with good standards, and devolving the responsibility of that to the development officer. And just overall, a really big overhaul in terms of language and definitions, making sure that everything's clear and precise and easy to use as much as these complex legal planning documents can be. A couple of changes here. The previous draft had processes for heritage buildings that didn't align with provincial requirements, so those have been updated to reflect that properly. And then the documents have been to the lawyers now for the kind of legal review to make sure everything is up to snuff in terms of clarity and defensibility. And so there's lots of very minor text changes for clarity that don't bear highlighting tonight, just to say that that work has been done to make these documents as strong as they can be. So that, long and short of it, is the highlights, and I've talked a lot, and really the purpose of the night is to hear from you, so I'm going to be quiet.
Mr. Watson, I sincerely thank you for all of the work that you've done. You've been an excellent partner towards the town, so my sincere thanks. So it is at this point in time in our agenda, ladies and gentlemen, that we will open the floor for public comments or presentations. So again, we have a large number of people here, so what I propose to do is I'm going to begin on this side of the room. We're going to work our way back and then work our way up towards this. I will state that I want to hear from those who wish to speak. So if you have opted to speak and provide comments or questions or feedback of one sort or another, if you have additional comments or questions or feedback, I will not get back to you until I make sure that I hear from everybody else first. Okay? So with that in mind, I will begin on this side towards the front of the room, and I'll just ask you to raise your hand if you indicate you wish to approach. I'll ask you to approach the microphone, introduce yourself, and provide your feedback. Oh, well, this is going to be very quick, so this is wonderful.
Going first, but good evening. I do have, acknowledging everyone who's at the table, I do have one question before I proceed to a statement.
Ma'am, just sorry, we're just going to turn your microphone on. Sorry, that's our fault.
It is on.
That's our fault.
How do we submit our feedback on this? We have tried, and in light of the fact that the deadline is supposed to be 8 o'clock this evening, which is when this meeting ends. After that time, we can't submit any feedback. Where do we put that? Because we've tried today.
This is your feedback, so I would encourage you to take the time now. We've had a number of public meetings with a number of rounds of feedback.
But for those who wish to submit additional written submissions, where is that?
This is the opportunity. There is no further, we don't have any further ability to consider written responses because of our timelines.
Okay, then moving on to my first question. With the removal of the sustainable overlay from the R2 areas, which if I'm not confused, they then become RN, or do they remain R2?
I'll just say it depends on the underlying zone. So it isn't, the sustainable subdivision overlay is just that. There's an underlying zone and then the overlay applies. So with the removal of the overlay, if the underlying zone is not changed, whatever that underlying zone would operate. But that being said, there may be, depending upon what specific area of the town you're talking about, there could have been a change to that underlying zone as well.
Okay.
I presume you're going to ask about forest trails.
Sorry?
I presume you're going to ask about forest trails.
Well, it's a general question, actually, to the removal of sustainable overlay relating to forest trails, but also, I think, quite general. I'm really having difficulty seeing how the removal of that sustainable overlay is positive, and as you put it, a big move to celebrate. How will it be better? Because if you look at forest trails development, and here I'm being general, not just specific, but it was one of the first areas that was designated under the original plan as R2 with sustainable overlay. And it has worked for the original intention. It's a holistic approach that considers a variety of housing needs, including affordability, along with environmental protection and overall sustainability. 3/4 of that plan has now been achieved, fully implemented, consistent with the Forest Trails subdivision plan signed by the town of Stratford. In the new official plan, the draft, Stratford is claiming to still prioritize environmental protection and reasonable green spaces to ensure quality of life for residents. But in actual practice, when you consider the development that we know is on the horizon for both Forest Trails and Flourish Heights, there's a quadrupling of the housing density in some of those areas. And with regard to the environmental protection that sustainable overlay provided, there's a wetland in there and a lot of green space in both areas. And if you look at the provincial policy as it currently stands for pertaining to wetland and environmentally sensitive areas, there are 3 statements. The first one is to avoid doing anything if possible to disrupt it. The second statement is, if necessary, do as little as possible. And the third statement says there must be compensation if the previously designated environmentally protected areas is unavoidable. So I'm feeling, after reading the draft plan and after many meetings with the town, that removing the sustainable overlay as it exists now is putting those green spaces and environmentally sensitive areas at greater risk. I don't see it as a reason to celebrate. So, can you please explain to us how it's better?
Sure. So I'm going to do 2 things. So I'm going to partially answer your question, but then I'm going to defer to Mr. Watson for part of it as well. So you're correct that those were the 2 areas in the town that were zoned with that sustainable subdivision overlay, the proposed Flourish or Foxwoods area as well as Forest Trails. And there's a number of laudable characteristics and aspirations behind those 2 areas, and parts of it worked. But respectfully, I think parts of why you identified those 2 specific areas are some of the reasons why that sustainable subdivision overlay, while laudable, in conception, in actual practice, have caused some difficulties in how to apply, I think, the aspirations that were behind it. And so, as Mr. Watson had noted in his presentation, we took the elements that really were aspirational about that and that we felt were working, and still have incorporated that not just solely within the sustainable subdivision overlays, but now throughout the town. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Mr. Watson now, and if he could provide perhaps a little more detail about those laudable elements of those overlays, but how they apply now to the town as a whole, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question. So yeah, the sustainable subdivision overlay, as I kind of alluded to before, the idea behind it was there was a whole bunch of environmental goals that had points associated with them, and if the subdivision came forward and it met certain environmental goals and you had enough points, you became a sustainable subdivision, and there was an awarding of extra density. There's a challenge in that it's very uncertain what that answer. You noted that yourself, that now they're coming back, in this example, coming back with more density, that there's uncertainty there about what that density is going to be. And so that's been challenging for neighbors. And that's one of the things we saw with the sustainable subdivision overlay. There were also some of the elements that, were kind of scored. We're not, we're good in idea, but not in practice. So things like low flow water fixtures. How does the town actually verify that, for example? But there are other elements of it that are really great things and are very well within the wheelhouse of the town to enforce and monitor, things like tree planting. So, for example, we've pulled out some of those tree planting requirements and just made them general requirements for certain types of development. The other big one that you touch on, I think, is that piece around land protection for the environmental protection. So traditionally in subdivisions in PEI, there's a subdivision, public land dedication. It's mostly intended for parkland. You know, when you do a subdivision, you give a certain percent of the land to the town for becoming a park. What was really great about the sustainable subdivision overlay was that it could be a tool to preserve other types of landscapes, you know, valuable natural landscapes, and we didn't want to lose that. So there is actually a new tool now. It's in 5.7 of the draft bylaw, and it's an ecological protection scheme. So it's essentially an alternative mechanism that has better teeth, better clarity, to allow the town to identify valuable natural landscapes and have a good tool to work with the landowner to set those aside. So that element we've really made sure to carry forward as it kind of is an alternative mechanism to the sustainable subdivision overlay, but that was one that was actually really important.
Okay, my comment regarding that, and I will go back and read that section, is I would ask the question, because a lot of the remediation and change does nothing to protect more. And my question to you is, what's changed about those environmental areas and their need of protection? We seem to be doing all kinds of workarounds and new rules that allow less protection. And I would say the town's ability to enforce those rules and regulations has been in question in our area, specifically with regard to drainage issues that have been promised to be fixed on 3 separate occasions and have not. The fact that the landowner of the lands in question under sustainable overlay was allowed to clear cut them. The owner of the land, not the developer. So it's a little difficult to believe that any of this new stuff is going to be better. I think Forest Trails is an example of how R2 with sustainable overlay really worked. We have mixed-use housing right from the beginning. We have affordable housing in there. We have single-use homes and townhouses. And just to my last point is, it is the opinion of one provincial government individual who was one of the authors of the R2 with sustainable overlay that it's still the best plan for the area, and is surprised because doesn't see the need for change. So I just feel that we may be doing things quickly to that doesn't directly benefit the residents of the area. And you know, that's a subject for discussion. I don't want to take time from anyone else, but those are the points we are having difficulty understanding. It doesn't improve anything in our area. It makes it more at risk. And we are talking about the revised wetland boundaries and plan, not the original. Still at risk. So those are my points. If you have any further comments on that?
No, unless you do, Mr. Watts, Mr. McKeegan? No, not at this time. Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate that. Come on up.
My name's Bonnie Gray, Dr. John Knox Way. Yeah. Can I just clarify one little point before I raise my general point? On the forest trails, we have, it's all clearly defined in the subdivision. So we knew exactly, everybody knew exactly what was going to be built, and it's conformed to that. It's just the last bit that suddenly Stratford developer want to deviate extremely. So it wasn't confusing, or it was all very clear. Just as a general thing, reading the the official plan, I'm wondering about the Stratford's human resource capacity to address the increase in housing that we're aiming for, plus the additional things that you want to be doing in terms of forestry and tree planting and that kind of thing. And as Susan mentioned, we're kind of, in terms of what we're living right now, it seems there's a lack of resources to deal with bylaws right now because we haven't been able to get Stratford to enforce the drainage plans for one. And there's 2 main streets there that are suffering. The homes are suffering from drainage problems. Plus, there's a Stratford green space around us. Part of it was clear cut when they developed. we asked Stratford if the developer or anybody was going to do anything with it. Stratford said, we don't have the money to plant a tree, but you're welcome to do it. So we, the residents, have planted trees on the Stratford land. So is Stratford resourcing up to deal with the new housing levels and environmental criteria that you're going to be
Yeah,
proposing?
it's a good question, right?
I haven't found it anywhere in the plan, but maybe I missed it.
No, and respectfully, that wouldn't really
It's kind of
fall.
a micro thing, but
Well,
it just,
It's an important thing, there's no doubt.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not necessarily something that falls within the official plan or zoning development bylaw. But to your point, these documents are not just aspirational documents; they are laws, right? And we
Yes,
all
yeah.
expect and undertake to follow the laws, but also expect that they are going to be enforced properly. And you're not wrong. There had been a number of discussions, particularly from certain of our councillors who have advocated and continue to advocate for more bylaw enforcement staff. And it is always a question of constraints of budget, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
And so sometimes these growths in terms of enforcement capacity and human resourcing are as best we can, because we're a municipality who cannot run a deficit. We're always mindful of our budget, and so sometimes we require the growth first so we can catch up on some of those resources or amenities that we or that you as residents expect and deserve. So it is a bit of a rubber banding sometimes, where development comes along, we receive an influx of new development money, then we're able to pursue some of these goals and objectives that we do have. You're absolutely right, and laws that are not enforced are worthless, and I'll be the first to say that, and it's something I absolutely endorse. So to that point, it's likely cold comfort to you, but it is absolutely top of mind for us as councillors. And we actually had a discussion earlier today just about that very fact, that we receive correspondence on a fairly frequent basis of issues surrounding bylaw enforcement. So it is a resource that we are looking to divert more towards. But it's not necessarily part of the official plan, if that makes sense. Although I take no issue whatsoever with you bringing
yeah.
it up here.
I just thought
Yeah.
there might be a general statement, a principle in the official plan, and I could have missed it, that said, we will ensure that there'll be appropriate resourcing to meet the objectives of this plan.
I don't
Just-
I don't take any issue with that. I
Yeah,
don't,
I
and
hear
so
you,
I
yeah.
think that's something we can take and look at incorporating.
And,
Yeah.
and it's just because we raise this concern, because over 5 years, we've seen the same pattern of lack of resourcing from Stratford, and we're suffering the consequence. Those drainage plans, for example, is one example, the trees are another thing. They were the basis for that developer to do the work. So the developer does the work, they're out of there with their profit, and we're stuck having to either finance or deal with all the repercussions of non-compliance with that drainage plan. So we're very nervous that there might not be the resources to, not for us, but for all the development that's going to happen. It's sort of like a red flag and a warning that it's very important, because it's the residents that pay the price in the end if Stratford isn't resourced to do the things that you want to do.
I agree wholeheartedly with that.
Can I ask a question? Are you suggesting that the developer violated the bylaws in doing?
Well, violated the drainage plan, for example.
Yeah.
But in the requirements of our subdivision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, we're not
This is not
supposed to.
okay. We're not going to get into this. Okay.
Okay.
And I don't want to discuss specific potential
no.
violations of any bylaws. Okay.
Okay.
And a general statement to
Talk to
suggest
the
that
director.
our whatever our laws are, that they need to be enforceable. That's something I absolutely endorse and agree with you
Yeah,
on.
that's my point.
Yeah, and that's something.
Overall
Yeah.
resourcing for
Yeah.
all of the things that
Yeah.
you want to do.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah,
Speak to that just 1 second, if you don't mind.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I'm just going to turn the mic over to our director of planning, Mr. McKeegan.
Hi, I'd like to speak to that situation you spoke of. I was out to the property behind the forest trails in the last 2 years. I made probably 3 visits, and I had discussion with residents. And I seen the problem behind that area with the drainage, and there was some mitigation measures done there, if that's what you're referring to. Okay, it's not? Okay, what I'm trying to say, I was there 3 times, and I seen some of the drainage issues and stormwater matters there. And what I had said to residents at that time was that when Forest Trails proposes their development, and then they come back with plans that show drainage or grading plans and stormwater management plans, I would try to address that as best as possible with the better elevation and drainage so that water all came towards the road.
Can I just answer?
So
that?
I'm just giving you my position as to what I'm aware of, because I was involved in some of that discussion,
So-
and it's not finalized yet.
So what I'd like to do, okay, if clearly there's a dialogue that's wanting to happen here, but we have a large room full of people who have many different perspectives, many different, so I'd ask you two to connect afterwards, see if we can't have a discussion about that, okay? Yeah. So who would be next? And please, do not be shy, please.
Hello,
Hi.
I'm Shelley Rowett. Do you need my address too, or? It's, I live on Pembroke Crescent.
Very good, yep.
So I just have a question specifically around, and forgive me because I'm not up on town planning, so I'm just kind of going by the plan that I see and my interpretation of it, but correct me if I'm wrong. So in the low-density zones within Stratford, so my area would be considered low-density zone, is that correct? It's light yellow on the map?
Yeah.
Okay. And most of the area between the Stratford Road all the way down to Kinloch Beach, and that whole area would be, yeah, if you could pull up the map, that'd be great. And I know you asked me not to get into specific areas, so I won't, but I'll keep it.
No, specific zones are fine,
Okay.
as long as it relates to zoning and development or the official plan.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I won't get into
Yeah.
specifics, but what my question is it looks like I'm looking at the, in the plan, it says for the following requirements shall apply to development in lower density residential zones. And it has a minimum lot size. It has a minimum front yard setback, minimum. So you have set out some specifications for those particular zones. What is your plan for the rest of those areas that are low density? How do you come up with the minimum specifications for the lot size, for the dwelling size, the design elements of the dwellings, and how they fit into the overall neighborhood?
Okay, I'll just say as a general principle, the function of minimum lot sizes and the setbacks essentially create a functional maximum dwelling size depending upon a minimum lot. But in terms of minimum dwelling, that's actually something that's not specifically addressed. But I'm going to turn to Mr. Watson actually, if he can speak to that, because I stand to be corrected, but I understand currently there are no proposed minimum dwelling sizes in the RL zone, at least.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, yeah, in the residential zones, there are minimums for things like addressed, lot size, setbacks, and that's very typical. There are not requirements in these bylaws for minimum dwelling size, nor are there architectural requirements. It's pretty atypical for a bylaw to regulate the architecture of a neighborhood. It can happen, but I don't see it very often.
Okay, that's very interesting. I'm not allowed to address the crowd. Okay, I'm curious. For me, the neighborhood that I live in has an aesthetic appeal. It has a type of home. They're executive homes, and I'm not opposed to other types of houses, but I think sometimes if the neighborhood looks skewed or just if the houses are significantly different, if you put up a modular home, for example, a small 500 square foot modular home next to a 3,000 square foot executive home, how do you see that playing out longer term in terms of how our neighborhoods look and the overall growth of the area?
So I don't want to answer your question with a question, but would it be fair to say that you'd be advocating for something along the lines of minimum dwelling sizes in certain zones,
Yes.
architectural standards in certain zones. As Mr. Watson stated, that is certainly not something that's atypical, but I'm just trying to get a sense of that's.
Yep, that's exactly where I'm headed with that. Yeah,
Okay, thank you. Yep.
thank you.
Hi, folks. Jody Jackson, Emily Drive. Just before coming in the meeting, I was looking, this general terms, at housing types. I saw on Amazon I can get a 20-foot prefab tiny home, expandable to 40 feet for about $15,000. When I asked about this type of housing, I was told it's technically already allowed in residential zones. So in that kind of general space, where in the new official plan, or in the current versus the new, where can I put these? Because I think if we're looking at a housing crisis, I don't know if anybody else in this room knew that they were allowed. And maybe if they were such a great idea, why aren't they outlined as a housing type, an acceptable housing type?
So I suspect the proverbial devil would be in the details, sir. But what I'll do is I'll turn it to Mr. McKeegan because the question is of a general one as it relates to our current and as well as potential future.
Yeah, I guess just to follow up, what has changed that this was not seen as allowable or not, seen as the answer to our housing crisis, if we want to call it the housing crisis, and it is for a lot of folks. If I can get one for $15,000 plus shipping in a can and buy a lot for $40,000 or $50,000 somewhere, isn't that a better answer? Why, if it's such a novel idea, why isn't this a housing type? And if it is now allowed in all residential areas, which I heard it potentially is, what has changed? What are we relying on?
Okay. We'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, okay, thank you. I think what's changing here is that we're trying to provide more opportunity for smaller lot sizes that can accommodate a smaller home, which then allows for better affordability. So obviously that's in the RN zone, and that's why the new zone was created. There's certain limitations on other lots based on lot coverages and size of buildings, that type of thing. So that's always been in there going forward. So is your question specific to the variation of types of houses on certain lots?
I'm just saying, am I allowed, I have one in my cart right now, am I allowed to put one of these $15,000 C-can homes on a theoretical lot in Stratford in any one of the residential zones? Because I think that's something we should all know. If we have kids who want to have a house here, and we're talking, town has turned down really nice developments for a lot less. There are folks in here that have to show, plans around shading, and they spent a ton of money to show this.
Right.
And I think it's a race to the bottom. If we're going to allow this in residential zones, I think it was a stretch to allow stacked townhouses.
Mm-hmm.
So where did this, if this is a new interpretation or whatever it is, I'd love to know what it is, because it would have been an answer for a lot of folks over the years. Mm-hmm. I don't think the plan has changed. I don't think anything's changed provincially. Mobile homes are still not permitted, which I think begs the question in this same official plan discussion. Mm-hmm. If you're going to allow these, why was that never an option to be entertained? Like, respectfully.
Yeah.
There's reasons not to have it, but it should have been in this conversation. If we're going to allow this, or it's been allowed, I think folks deserve an explanation why and what they expect, and what's stopping anybody from putting these in every vacant lot in Stratford right now.
Right. Basically, we don't have any architectural standards in the town of Stratford that were ever adopted as an actual document. So there's limitations on what we can deny, so to speak. We are still working on the document as we speak to try to be more specific as to what is allowed and what's not allowed. It's not final yet. So I think
it is, though.
Pardon me?
According to the media, it sounds like it is.
Well, I can't speak for the media. I can speak for in-house. That's
Yeah.
where I speak from. But all I know is that it's an ever-changing document, that it's a live document, and it will remain that way until it's approved. And even when it's approved, it's still a live document that's available for amendment. So we haven't finalized everything yet. We're still working on some stuff, and
So
we
I
have
should
discussions.
hold off on buying my foldable.
That's entirely
home?
up. That's entirely
Well,
up to you.
I heard at the door that it would be allowed, so I'm going to buy that. But I guess one last thing, though.
Yeah.
So with mobile homes not being allowed,
Correct.
they do have to be CSA standard stamped.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that here with these. I don't see National Building Code references to it.
Mm-hmm.
They're so new and novel. If we truly want to be leading edge, get out there and debate this in the public, not just as a last minute kind of potential interpretation,
Right.
convenient interpretation, because I think that's what it is.
Right. And every application that comes through the planning office has an application, a description of what's being proposed, and it is reviewed by our building official to meet the National Building Code. If it doesn't meet the National Building Code, we cannot approve it. Or there has to be adjustments to it to make it meet the
Is
National
that true
Building
for
Code.
everyone?
Pardon me?
Is that true for everyone, or is that case by case?
It basically applies to everything. Everything we review and everything we analyze, we look at it from a code perspective, especially buildings, and we have to. We have adopted the National Building Code.
Okay. So if there is a precedent set here, then I think that the unintended consequence here is that could potentially see in every residential lot this type of thing.
I would like to think that's not going to be the case, because
But there's nothing stopping them. It sounds as if there's nothing stopping them.
I wouldn't say not necessarily. There are situations where you look at the character of a neighborhood as best you can to see that things match up as best you can. Of course, that's in the eye of the beholder a lot of times.
Yeah.
But we do use good practical sense in trying to apply things.
Okay, and in that spirit, I'm not talking about a specific place, but
Right.
in the spirit of a fictional neighborhood off Kinloch Road, I think that's been loud and clear that they don't see that there.
Yeah.
So that's all I have.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for the opportunity. My concern is regarding the new bylaws.
And sir, just before you go, I know you've been here before, so I sincerely apologize. Could I just get your name for the record?
Prab, P-R-A-B,
Prob.
MAN, M-A-A-N.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes. My concern is regarding the new bylaws. Do we have a bylaw for the underground utilities like telecommunications, power?
No.
No.
No. Utilities are provincially regulated,
Okay.
and there has been certainly some different approaches taken towards utility installation and utility infrastructure installation in the town. Some areas of the town have buried lines and others do not, and that's usually up to the specific wishes and desires of the developer. But they have to work obviously with our regulated utilities to make sure that they're in compliance one way or another.
Well, why not force them? Like, why not have a bylaw saying that you have to go underground?
We can't encroach upon provincially regulated industry. We don't have any authority to circumvent the Electric Power Act.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was my question.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Sure.
Good evening. My name is Juan Carnial. I operate short-term rentals here in Stratford, and I support reasonable regulations, including licensing, local management, parking requirements, safety standards, and strong enforcement against operators who create problems. What concerns me at the moment is the proposed bylaw effectively prevents new investment property from being operated as short-term rental unless is the registered owner's primary residence. And this limits the property owner to one short rental at the time in town, right? These significant restrictions on how people can use the property and on the ability of local business are operated. So I attended the previous public consultation, and I did not hear significant public demand for restriction on this this magnitude that have been applied from the previous draft to this one. So my question to the council is, what specific evidence, data, complaints, housing analysis, or public feedback received since the previous consultation justified imposing the primary residence requirement and the short-term rentals 1 per owner limit? And why did council determine that these restrictions were necessary instead of just regulating the actual problems through licensing, professional local management, occupancy, parking rules, enforcement, etc.? So I'm not asking why you feel the need to regulate the short-term rentals. I get that, and I agree with that. I just trying to understand what is the evidence that has been used to escalate this matter.
Okay, so we're going to do two things, Mr. Carniel. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Scott Carnell, who has been spearheading our short-term bylaw incorporation into the zoning development bylaw. So he's going to answer some of the technical elements, and I think I'm just going to finish off the answer when Mr. Carnell's finished by, just in terms of, I guess the bylaw making process, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Ron. Yeah, when we did the initial research, we did surveys and it was questionnaires, and when the survey result was a 50-50 kind of like result of not wanting short-term rentals and people that wanted short-term rentals. So it was kind of like, this is our first time of bringing this bylaw in. The province has mandated that the municipalities bring in the short-term rental bylaw. It felt at ease for us to gently bring this in and see how it goes. And that we do have a lot of emails about complaints that do come in, and people are emailing saying this shouldn't happen in their area. So there is those complaints that do come in on a regular basis. They do go to nuisances calls. So it was just, it's the first time it's coming in. We have to test it. We can't go too far ahead because it's very difficult to pull it back if it's a mistake. So allowing just for the singles and the double dwelling units is kind of the put foot in the door and see how it goes, and then see how what needs to be done from there.
So following up on what you just said, would it make more sense to start soft and then, if needed, put in more restrictions? But it seems like this decision has already been made, because from the previous draft, it was sort of like more soft. And I was here in the previous two meetings, and not a single person came here to complain about those short-term rentals. And still, I see that steps have been taken and the regulation became more strict without any complaint or anyone manifesting that. And you mentioned about emails and stuff,
But that's what we
we
get.
don't have access to those.
Well, the surveys were posted and the results were posted when we did those engagements, and we did have enough significant responses. Not everybody comes to a public meeting. Usually when they see that things are going, they're happy with that, they don't really come out. So that's sometimes why you won't see that attendance at public engagements. But it is the soft option, right? We have also gone for a legal review to make sure that we're going the right way straight off the bat. And so it is a test and see. We know that there's units out that are currently operating, and those won't be pulled back. Those licenses will continue to operate. That's the conversation that we had with tourism PEIs, that unless those properties were to change ownership, we won't be closing those licenses or addressing those licenses.
And that's another important point. As an investor, I understand wanting to protect the housing market and properties that are currently operating as a long-term rental, not bringing into a short-term rental scenario. So I get that. But if a house is already a short-term rental and an investor happens to buy the house to continue, why not allow that?
because you're changing it from a residential use to a commercial use, if that's what you want to sell the property of. And so that's a change of use as well, right? So
No,
there's
if I'm buying it
complication.
as an investor, I'm not changing the use.
But you're buying
I'm
a
buying
house.
from a short-term rental.
Okay, so I'm just going to say this. So, Mr. Carniel, you keep using
Yeah.
this word, and respectfully, investor, right? And the number one thing that we have heard time and time again at this public meeting to date, as well as almost every other public meeting we've had, is the protection and preservation of the character of the neighborhoods. And with the greatest of respect, I take no issue with short-term rentals as long as they're properly regulated. I would think the vast majority of the residents of this, and I think our surveys bore this out, is that they don't view them as investment stock. They view them as places to live, places to raise families, communities. Okay? So short-term rentals, we recognize they can have a valuable place in this community. We recognize that people have them. We're looking to regulate them. We have, frankly, the data to support it, but as a decision-making and a legal making body, we are going down this road. And we appreciate people wanting to invest, but this is the decision that we've made as council, and this is the decision we're going to likely take. That being said, certainly this is why we're here, right? We're here to hear from you and others. Changes might be made. I can't promise you one way or another, because there are certainly could be people here to speak about short-term rentals, and we'll hear from them as well. I understand, I absolutely appreciate where you're coming from, but there's a reason we took this model. The reason is to protect the character of the neighborhoods, and it's in response to the surveys and the data that we have received. And more broadly, as Mr. Carnell noted, we have an obligation through the province now, if we're looking to offer these types of accommodations, that we have a bylaw regulating. So we have to do something.
And just to clarify, I'm not saying transforming all the properties into short-term rental, just keeping the one that we already have. That's what I was saying. But
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, thank you, sir. Ooh, anybody else? Sure. I just want to make absolutely sure, but I'm certainly not going to cut you off, because I did expect probably more comments, but if not, then that's fine too. Yes.
Julie Hambley, and I'm Falcon Avenue in Stratford. Circling back to your comment about preserving the character of neighborhoods and new adjoining neighborhoods that will be developed, how do we in this room address this with you? Because you have put some barriers up as to what we can ask while we're here tonight. So how do we address this, that the character is preserved in these new subdivisions going forward? What can we do out here? Because there's a lot of people in this room who want to know. So
Absolutely.
I will leave that for you to tell us all.
Sure. Why don't you just stay there just for a second, okay? So it's a good point. And, you know, this notion of character of a neighborhood, right? I mean, it's not something that can be so specifically defined ever. It's something that you know it when you see it, and it happens and it evolves over time, of course. And the character of the neighborhood is a protected criteria that is in our current official plan, and is certainly carrying through to any new official plan as well, is that's certainly something that we always have to consider, right? We do so in a way that we try to balance a whole lot of factors, right? Certainly, and among those is a resident's expectation, right? I mean, if you live in a neighborhood over time, you expect it to operate and behave in a certain way. And certainly that's part of what we're talking about here. Now, I'm certainly not looking to curtail any debate over any potential future applications that might come before us. Now, the one, Ms. Hambley, that you're referring to it's not even before planning board right now. But there are elements of that, I apologize, one of your fellow citizens had mentioned something, something along the effect of architectural standards, minimum building sizes, design criteria, that absolutely are germane to what we're talking about here. And it's come up time and time again in correspondence that we've received from other residents of the town and probably neighbors of yours, to be totally honest with you. And so certainly those are elements that we will be looking at having a discussion on based upon the feedback we've received here tonight. And so certainly rest assured that there are elements within that can certainly fit within, you know, this discussion we're having about zoning and development bylaws. But I can't go down this road about a specific subdivision because that's a more onerous process than what our bylaw contemplates right now. And I'm just not going there. But
And I respect
Yeah.
that, but
Yeah.
I think we all need to know how we, as residents of Stratford, can address some of the bylaws.
a large number of people have already reached out to myself as well as my fellow councillors.
Okay.
That's exactly what we're here for.
Perfect.
This form specifically is something different.
Well, maybe we
But-
need a new form.
Well, you know, we're always a phone call away. We're I've received a number of emails, and for myself, I'll be honest with you, emails are wonderful because I have them. I can refer them. I can count them up. I can see where people are at. I would encourage each and every person within this town hall to always reach out to your elected officials and about something that may be going on. That's absolutely, like, I mean, I've received a number of comments about what you're talking about, and I certainly will take them into account when it comes back before planning board. I'll say that. And the more I have, the better informed planning board and council can be.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I'll get you next. No, it's okay. Yeah, we'll get.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Chris Callahan, Maple Leaf Row. Just to kind of build on this conversation, if we're not clear yet on architectural criteria, could it be a suggestion to do what you mentioned about the Airbnb process of taking a survey from residents on what would be considered that acceptable criteria? Because I think in the current plan, if I'm not mistaken, there is a section on form and character, a section on roof design, and comments around how flat roofs would be generally avoidable. I think these are important architectural considerations that would be easily identifiable and most people would resonate with. But perhaps a suggestion is to take the survey route if we're not clear on how to get there yet. But to be clear, there is construction happening now that is inconsistent with that.
I think what I can say to that, sir, is I appreciate what you're saying, but surveys to inform the general can be slow and cumbersome, and they may not quite capture it. I think to kind of go where you're going, though, I think what we could do, and something that I'm going to suggest with my other councillors, is to provide council at least with some flexibility to determine on a case-by-case basis, depending upon the specific character of each individual neighborhood in which potential development might happen, these elements that you're discussing, you know, like roof pitch, like architectural, like highlights, cladding, building materials, things of that nature. And I think, you know, council can be, in my experience, quite receptive to that and very sensitive to those issues. And so I think right now we don't have those tools, probably for some good reasons, but I'm not saying we can't look at them, and I think it's something that I would like to see to address some of these edge cases that do come up from time to time that certainly attract a large amount of public interest, such as what's likely bringing you here today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Charlotte Jenkins. My question is on a specific area that seems to be a bit higher density within kind of a very low density part of Stratford, and that is kind of the area just south and perhaps a little bit east of Fox Meadow. So it would be kind of down below Fox Meadow.
West there.
Or I guess west. Yeah, yep, further. Yeah, there you go. So I think it forms the old Golf Academy property and also a portion of Foxwoods subdivision. All of the property around it is low density residential. All of the property kind of on that side of Kinloch Road is low density residential. A little perplexed as to why there's been this M2 or M1, sorry, zoning for these couple of lots. Again, I recognize there's an intention here to try and expand the availability and types of housing within Stratford, but as we've kind of alluded to already here, the intention of the town is to do that within the existing parameters of subdivisions. Some of the objectives in the new official plan are to, keep the nature of these residential neighborhoods, Foxwoods, Stonington being some of those residential neighborhoods that we've talked about. And some of the comments in that official plan are that these areas may see some change and intensification over the life of the official plan through new subdivision of undeveloped land, but they will primarily expect to remain relatively the same. In an area that is almost exclusively low-density housing, it seems a little bit curious as to why there's just these two higher density, medium density lots being proposed. And I know it was a form of contention in previous meetings and made it into the comments and kind of what you've heard to date. Just curious kind of on the why, kind of where it falls within sound planning principles to plunk a couple of more high density lots right into the middle of an already established and well-built subdivision. Just looking for some clarity on that as to why.
Sure. So, Mr. Watson, are you okay just to provide the underlying rationale for the proposal as it exists right now?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think, this particular case and many of the others where there's been a change in zoning does fall kind of into that category that you mentioned of that intensification of unsubdivided land. So one of the key things we heard early in the engagement process was, the existing neighborhoods, the existing subdivisions, didn't want to see a lot of change in there in terms of, someone over here taking their house and turning it into 2 units, that sort of thing. So we really looked for those areas where there's unsubdivided land, where there would be a new neighborhood, to look for opportunities to allow more diverse housing types. And generally, for example, in this case, this is a situation where access is directly to a major road. So there's, it really isn't going through an existing neighborhood, for example. So it does fall in that category of the unsubdivided land that would see some minor intensification.
And just a quick clarifying point, the portion of that is RM1 that is furthest kind of away from Fox Meadow, if you come down the road, that forms part of the existing subdivision and would theoretically be accessed not by Kinloch Road, correct?
So that aligns with the approved subdivision plan there? Yeah. So that there is a portion of higher density in the approved subdivision plan, and also the park dedication related to the shale pit. So those two pieces kind of reflect the existing approved subdivision plan.
The existing approved plan for Foxford.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Bert McKinnon, Falcon Avenue. I have a question, probably a twofold question. One is, I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume that this exercise tonight is obviously to get public input on proposed map or planning and bylaws for a period in the future, and that there's also some considerations around the change in development and housing needs and so forth as far as influence a lot of the decisions. I have a question around properties that are perhaps received approval in the past from the town to do certain types of development, and how that fits in with this plan. In other words, would they have to come forward to the town to request changes if they had proposed changes? And if they did propose changes, then I'm curious as to how the process works. I think that they come to your planning board and it's perhaps presented there with changes that are proposed. And then the planning board at some point makes a decision on whether they want to support the recommendations or the request. And then I suspect that then you pass it on to council to perhaps making a decision, or maybe the planning board has its own autonomy to make the decision, I don't know. it's kind of a threefold question. But I also, in the final part of it, is that I want to know, because most of this information we've been hearing about within the town is kind of secondhand and sometimes through rumor process or whatever the case may be. And I know you can come to the town and ask questions and that kind of thing. But I'm just curious as to how these things unfold as I described, and how you would know if proposed changes were proposed. So, for example, when I say an existing property had received approval at some point, and whoever owns it decides that the town's going through a process now and they're open to other suggestions and things like that, and they want to make some changes to the approval. How does that work? And how does, for example, how do the residents that live near or by, or anybody in the community for that matter, how do they become informed of this happening? Anyway, so I don't want to confuse you, but that's kind of
No,
what it is.
I think I understand exactly what you're saying, sir. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. McKee in a second, but just in general, what I'm going to say is I appreciate and I completely understand the question. I will say this, our town's website improved somewhat, but it can be sometimes hard to find the information. But what I will say is that each and every agenda for every meeting is posted on our town's website. Any item that is coming before council for any resolution is always, almost always discussed. I'm going to say almost always, but I'm going to hang more towards that always in one committee or the other, whether it's infrastructure, planning, committee of the whole, or whatnot. And so that's a good way to keep an eye on what may be coming up for resolutions. In terms of specific notifications, it depends on what type of development we're talking about. Some with respect to conditional use require notification to adjoining landowners. Some with respect to special permit uses require a broader radius for notification. So I hate to lean back on it depends, but it sometimes does. But what I can state with almost complete certainty is that absent some really legally sensitive resolutions, almost all resolutions are posted through our town's meeting agendas. So that's a good way to get a pulse on all of the things that may be coming up for decisions by council. There are decisions, and I'll turn it over to Mr. McKeegan, that can be made by, in the planning context at least, by development officers such as Mr. McKeegan and his staff. And I'll turn it over to him so he can speak to that a little bit and give you a kind of a breakdown as to where that line might be.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. I understand your question. It's very clear in some ways because and Chair did give some examples of when the process becomes more public with being notified to adjacent landowners or budding landowners, or whether it requires a special meeting of the public because it's a special permit use, things like that. So that brings it to the surface more for the public. When an existing subdivision has been approved and the developer or the landowner wishes to make some amendments or changes to that, revisions, or whatever the case may be, then it becomes a situation as to what degree of change is happening, and does it require rezoning, or does it require special permit use for basically a public meeting, that type of thing. So there are measures in place that allow it to be brought to the public. Now, there may be some minor alterations that we can take care of internally as a planning staff, but again, they're quite minor. There's not going to be a major impact from our perspective and from the bylaw perspective as well. So I don't know if I can get you any more detail than that, because we have to wait and see what is being proposed. There's minor changes and there's more severe changes that require public meetings, and if it's going through a bylaw review like we're going through now, it would be brought back to the public at some point in form if it's a rezoning or any other kind of change to that. Does that help any for clarity?
A little bit, but can I ask you a couple of things?
Fine with me.
Yes. Okay, so the thing that I have thing that I don't understand is, and maybe it's straightforward and simple.
Sure.
Just curious as to, and it's got to do with being informed about what's going on, and I'm as much as fault as anybody else as far as, not being aware of a lot of things. And but I just looked at the process and thought about the checks and balances within the process. So, when you get a bit of panic going on when there's something happening and people start talking about it and so forth. But I think this is a good example of having a chance to have your input into this process.
Yeah.
But when you're look down the road and you look at individual developments, I guess the thing for me I'd like to get clear on is that if you approved a development plan and somebody, for example, had an already approved development that they didn't develop or whatever, where is the point where public can participate with planning boards or with councils? Because I would imagine that once something gets to council and you can come and listen to the council discuss a particular situation, I would think that at that point the chances of really changing council's decision would probably be pretty narrow.
I can speak to that, and I would say that's not my experience. In many instances, and I speak mostly in the planning context because that's the realm of my responsibility here at the town, is very frequently my fellow councillors receive direct feedback from the residents that live in their wards about certain developments, and to voice almost, well, not always, but in many instances, opposition to specific developments. And those councillors are very adept and very sensitive to resident feedback, and almost to a rule will bring that first and foremost in their decision-making process. And so I want to disabuse you entirely of the suggestion that, you know, once the train's out the door, that's it, decision's made, done deal, don't even bother. Because my experience has been completely the opposite in that regard. You know, we have a very well-informed citizenry here in Stratford. People, and we're a close-knit community, and people do talk. You're absolutely correct. And, you know, and sometimes rumors fly, but there's sometimes a grain of truth in that. And then people will reach out to their elected representatives, hopefully get the correct information, and will almost always provide feedback of a valuable format to those councillors. And in my experience, there's been many resolutions that I might have voted one way, and other councillors, because of the feedback of their residents, have voted another way. That happens frequently in my experience. So I just want to make it absolutely certain that, you know, that's the job of the elected representatives of this municipality, is to hear from you and your fellow citizens and to bring those concerns forward.
Okay, so let me ask you a couple of micro questions, and one is around, we're not talking about a large development, but let's say a particular subdivision has 6 or 8 lots in it. Haven't sold them, and you're looking to do something that is quite a little bit different from what was originally planned and what was approved. If somebody wants to bring the lot sizes down from where they are, approved, okay? So is there an obligation on the town's part to inform citizens in a certain distance from where this is happening that this is taking place? And now, I know that's a micro question, I know you're talking about a big plan here and so forth, but what I'm getting at is that this allows for a lot of public input if there is a process in place, and maybe there is, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't mind the question because I think it's germane to everybody in the room, and some people are very well versed in planning law, others less so. So what I'm going to do is turn it over to Mr. McKeegan, and he can provide you know, again, we can't, I'll just say this, sir, I can't keep doing every micro question you might have, but just in terms of notifications and things like that, I'd like Mr. McKeegan to address this one, and then we'll see where we go from there, okay?
I'm not trying to bog down the process tonight on micro questions, but what I'm trying to do is get clarity on when developments are getting approved, were approved and asked for change, big size, small size, whatever it is. Where does the public, where is the place for them to insert themselves into a discussion with councillors or planning boards or council itself? So that's what I'm trying to get to.
Sure.
So that everybody in this room can hear this, and then we'll have an idea what when it comes time to discuss things, we'll have a chance to do that in the proper way.
Yeah. And in that spirit, I certainly appreciate the question. Mr. McKeegan, you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I think going forward, the point you're making is that if something's already been approved and exists as a approved subdivision, and the developer or investor comes back and wants to change the lot sizes, that type of thing, well, we have regulations that have minimums that they can't go a certain size and all the different factors that regulate that. So that in itself does control the lot sizes when they're proposed for change. Now, at any point in time, if planning board and or council feel that there's significant change from what's already existing, which would then allow for a smaller type of home typically because you have a smaller lot, then they could look at that differently by saying, look, there's significant change here or a change that could impact the existing neighborhood. That would be an opportunity for planning board to make a recommendation to council if they chose to, and also for council to make a decision, should we allow this kind of thing. So there are regulatory measures in place that do make sure that the lot sizes are somewhat similar, but if they meet the bylaw requirements, there may be a chance that that's not the situation at all. Because if they meet the bylaw requirements, then they meet the bylaw requirements.
Yeah, I understand that.
So, and Mr. Watson does have something he'd like to say, and so I'll absolutely want to turn the mic over to him as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm belaboring this topic a little bit, but it's because I think it's an important one. You've asked a really good question, is how do I be an effective citizen in these planning discussions, and I think that's really good to know. I think the first place for public involvement is here in the drafting of these documents. This official plan, this zoning and development bylaw, they set the base standards for development in the town. So they set those absolute minimum lot sizes. That sets the bar. So this is the first really step of public engagement in the planning process. Some of the things that come out of this will be, they end up being fairly minor types of development. They're not something that goes back to the public because we've set the rules up front through this process. And hey, when you come in to get the permit to build your house, that doesn't need to be a public process. That goes to Dale's team and they check it against the bylaw and yep, you meet the standards and here's your permit. There are certain classes of development that get bumped up a level. There's what we're calling major developments in this newest version. They're laid out in section 3.5. Mixed-use buildings, large residential buildings, larger commercial buildings, subdivisions over 5 lots. Those all go to planning committee for review. That's not necessarily a public process in that you participate, but it is a publicly facing process in that it's out in the public and you can see it and it's in the minutes and all those sorts of things. And then there's other types of development where it very much is a public process in terms of notification and involvement in meetings like this, things like variance requests. So if you're asking for a change from the standards to, I want to be able to do a building that's a little taller than what the zone allows, that's a public process. If it's a special permitted use, so there's certain uses that are allowed in zones, but only if they go through the public process. They're maybe a little more intense or a little more questionable in terms of their impacts, and there needs to be a public process. And then the kind of the really big ones are rezonings. You come in to say, my zone is currently RL. I want to do a townhouse subdivision, so I want to rezone it to that RM2. Well, that's a major change, and that's so that is a public process. The one other piece in all of this, and I think to answer this is an important part about being effective, is that council's decision making has boxes around it in terms of what they can make their decisions based on. And part of that is fairness to the landowner, fairness to everyone, that we have these standards that are set out and you can see them and you can see what they allow. So when council rejects something, it's not just because, I didn't, my residents didn't like that. It's why didn't they like it? Is it based on issues about stormwater control or traffic, or there has to be a reason grounded in potential impacts that council says no, or else they're vulnerable to an appeal at the board. So there are different tiers there, but but you've started right now by being involved in this meeting, which is great.
Okay, thanks.
Great question. So I appreciate you asking, sir.
Lorene O'Neill, 32 Autumn Lane. So with having...
That was Autumn Lane, sorry?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So having said that, looking at the Forest Hills area, it was originally zoned for 20 additional townhouses to come into that area. And now it is it's rezoned for mid-density. And so now that they're putting 90 townhouses. So back to that and what you've just said, because it was approved and then now has been reapproved. And what was the thinking behind putting 90 townhouses in that small area?
Okay, so just a couple of things. Just give me 1 second, okay? I just need to check with something.
Oh, my mistake. I thought the zoning had changed. The zoning is the same.
Okay, just stay there for a second. So the reason I had to check with Mr. McKeegan is part of that whole area of the town is subject to an appeal to IRAC from the developer. We're constrained to discuss a lot of the elements of that because of that appeal. But what I will say is the large increase of units of the townhouse nature were due to some of the features of that sustainable subdivision overlay. And it's one of those reasons that we are looking to repeal that sustainable subdivision overlay throughout the town, because it's one of the features of that enabled a large number of those townhouse structures to be, as you said, approved. That did not come before council. I can say that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's fine. I think we're giving people an opportunity to come on up. Yep.
Not going to take much time. I actually just asked to come back to the mic because I don't think I said my name when I spoke earlier, and if it's going in the official record, it's Susan Chiteri from Autumn Lane.
I didn't push. I know who you are, Mr. Cherry. So
Okay, I wasn't sure. I just thought, but listening to the last few comments, I did think of one other thing that I'd like to say, and that's overall the zoning changes that are proposed are to increase density in many areas. And I think my question to you all is, if we're increasing density and you say that you still want to preserve the existing character of neighborhoods, in some cases that will change the character of the neighborhood dramatically. If you look at our town core, we're not seeing a whole lot of changes there with regard to improving density, which would be, you would think, the location for higher density. It seems that vacant lots are now coming in for more fast food restaurants, which is something I don't think Stratford needs. The empty lots, which we're hoping we're going for residential, don't seem to be, unless I'm misinformed. If you look at best practice planning in many other suburban and urban areas in the country, that model of having commercial on the main level of a dwelling block and then residential above it is something that we've seen adopted in many communities in Canada and in Europe. And I keep wondering when I drive down the core of Stratford why we're not doing that here. There is the location for density. People can walk to services, walk to shopping. It's attractive. Your commercial space is on the ground floor. People have ability to live in apartments or condos above them. They're fairly low rise. To me, that's something that we should be looking at, not in changing the character of existing neighborhoods. And some of that change, regardless of what we've heard here tonight, is going to impact natural features, environmentally sensitive areas, without question. I don't see the justification for that when we could be doing something that's been proven successful elsewhere and not dramatically change what Stratford homeowners and taxpayers bought their houses for here, because we wanted it the way it looks and for what the plan that for our areas was stated to be. So.
I have some encouraging news for you then in that regard. I would encourage you to go down Irving Avenue, where there are two such mixed-use developments, one already open to the public and one soon to be open to the public. Also look into our waterfront mixed-use zone, which describes a development exactly as you're describing.
Yeah.
We can't build, we can just create the conditions for development, as well as, and maybe I'll let Mr. Watson speak to this actually, the light blue shaded areas as well as the dark blue shaded areas and some of the features of that. And I think they address specifically what you're saying, ma'am. So I'll just turn it over to Mr. Watson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So yeah, one of the things we did here through this project was that we, as much as possible, wanted to preserve those existing neighborhoods. And so a lot of the changes that were made for densification, the major changes, were in this core area. Now, some of those changes on this purple and the dark blue lands that had already been done as part of a previous planning application, and now it's up to the landowner to actually build it. But we took a lot of the principles that had been done, through that work and extended it to the core area and as well as the waterfront mixed use zone. The waterfront mixed use zone is actually already in effect. It was done ahead of time, and it both allows mixed residential, commercial, institutional, but on the major streets, it actually does require non-residential on the ground floor. So that framework's in place. It's going to take landowners to come forward and build it.
Yeah.
And, admittedly, that's a bit of a new thing, and there's the development industry in the area needs to kind of wrap its head around doing that.
Yeah.
But the framework is there actually in the core, which is really exciting about it.
Yeah, I've seen the plans for that, and it looks really exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't live in that area. I might have a different feeling if I did. But I'm talking about the actual core. It's a lot of vacant lots. And we're hearing now, if I'm not mistaken, Dairy Queen and McDonald's are coming in to those lots. Why aren't we using that central core of the town for mixed commercial and residential is my question.
We are. They're there. They're available to develop by the landowners. We don't control when that development happens. If I had my way, they'd all be up and moving as soon as they're approved for development. Because that, as a councillor, that gives me much more resources to pursue the objectives that we want and that you want as residents, right? That's the lifeblood of our town is development money,
Yep.
so we can,
Is there a
provide you-
reason that developers choose residential neighborhoods for for a higher density rather than commercial town core?
I think both Mr. Carnell and Mr. McKee want to speak to it, so I'll start with Mr. Carnell and then I'll go to Mr. McKee.
Thank you, Chair. So you will see in the new documents that the access for convenience stores has been allowed, permitted in the new low-density zones as well. So that does provide an opportunity for those corner stores or nodes and connections that might see those places where you have a unit below and residential above. You would see also the changes in the core areas that a lot of that was commercial. So we've changed a lot of those parcels from commercial zones to now mixed use, where previously, so that combination of residential and commercial was really harder to do. So now we're changing that core area to a more mixed use. You will see more of a mixture, and we are seeing those applications are. In regards to some of the character in the low density, I would actually disagree with the comment. I think when you actually allow a low density zone to have influx of changes, that actually adds more character to the neighborhood. It allows generations and changes of lifestyles within the neighborhood. Younger families can stay within the community that they grew up in. You allow for seniors to downsize into those areas without having to be transported to a new area that only allows small row houses or small apartments. So it allows that change. A lot of that is focused on connections and around the major routes. So you will see some of that, but it does actually add a lot of character when you have that flexibility. And when you look at Stratford, not every house is the same. So there's variations. You have 2 stories, you have bungalows, you have changes of design. So having an influx of a 2-unit that looks like a single or a townhouse, that adds character to that neighborhood.
Yeah, I would agree with it in principle that if you add smaller lot sizes and density to existing neighborhoods, it allows younger people to move in and stay where they grew up. However, I think it's incumbent on planning and council to ensure that those developments, both in appearance and impact, don't damage the areas that they're being put into, both environmentally and aesthetically.
Like if you're looking at higher density, it doesn't really impact the environment. Actually, it's a better use of that land.
It depends what you're sacrificing to put it there. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. We'll move on to Mr. McKee.
Okay, I want to address the situation with the urban core on the Trans-Canada on both sides. Approximately 4 years ago, that area was rezoned, and on the north side, it's called the urban core, and that allows up to 12-story buildings. The main floor is commercial, all along that side. On the south side, it's called core mixed use. That allows up to 6-story buildings, again with the commercial on the main level. So there is some variation there that's going to take care of a lot of density in the future. And when that future is, nobody really knows. It depends on the developer when they want to develop something. But that was all done under form-based codes. And form-based codes gives you the complete picture of a traditional zone just says what can go there. The form-based codes tells you all the different standards that are applied. So you create an urban form, sidewalks, the landscape, all the different things are put together in one package. So you'll see the result of that when it does happen. And I think what's going to do, it's going to fill in what you're concerned about and give it a more dynamic core area.
So you have proposals to develop that area now?
Pardon me?
You have proposals to develop?
It's been approved for urban core and CMU.
Approved, but have developers offered bids on it? Is it going to happen? Can you?
I can't guarantee it's going to happen, but the reason that it did happen was to allow that type of development to go in there.
Okay.
Okay.
That just takes it back to my other statement, though. Why does it seem that developers are really quick and eager to build in existing residential areas to increase density rather than bid on these town center urban core developments? Is it a cost thing?
No, I'll explain that to you. One developer owns the core area land. They purchased that a while ago. That's up to them when they develop. Mostly they develop the lands themselves. The other areas you're talking about within development is individual landowners who may want to develop certain types of activities.
Okay, thank you
Okay,
for
you're
answering
welcome.
that.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, thanks.
And I did see somebody with their hand raised just in the back as well. Okay, I'll get you next. Okay.
Hi, sorry, I have mobility issues. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah. Councillor Cox, you want to bring the microphone to her? You mind doing that? Might not go that far.
Can't hear me?
No.
It's sitting. Hi, my name's Carol Williamson. I'm on Southampton Drive. I didn't realize how unprepared I was, and kudos to you ladies that had all that information in your repertoire. I just want to know, bottom line, is this a done deal, Flourishing Heights? Like, is it a done deal? I read 287 units.
Okay, so I'll just say you may not have caught it at the beginning, so I'll just.
And I'm not hearing well tonight at all.
Okay.
You're right, Dean. I need those hearing aids.
Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
We're not here to discuss that subdivision. And the reason is, and I'll tell you two things. First of all, it's not even before Planning Committee right now. Okay? There was an erroneous CBC News article that suggested it received preliminary approval or some form of approval. That's a falsehood. I don't know why they published that. They've since retracted it. That's not correct.
Well, they were on Compass last week.
I'm just telling you, it's not been approved. It's absolutely not been approved. Under our bylaw, public meetings are not a requirement for major subdivisions. We can't begin a process where we turn this public meeting into a discussion on a major subdivision, as we'd be in breach of our zoning development bylaw specifically, but also planning law in general. It's an unfair burden on the developer. So I can say that specific subdivision proposal is back with the developer because Planning Committee had a number of concerns. We don't know when it will be back. We will deal with it when it becomes an item for Planning Committee to discuss. And as I've said to a few people here, if you wish to provide input on that, I would absolutely encourage you to reach out to whoever your elected officials are here within the town.
By email, you said.
Yes.
Yes.
That's I won't limit you to email, but I'm just saying for myself, it's helpful so I can get a running record of who said what when.
Okay, is there any time, can you give us a time, a year, 6 months, like when all this?
My expectation would certainly be towards the next few months at most, where it would come back. Yeah.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Councilor Cox, I think you wanted to say something? Yeah.
I do have a question at the end. I'll just address everybody here. By no means by being a spokesperson for councillors or for the staff. My name's Gordy Cox. I'm one of the councillors here in Stratford. And so I moved here over 30 years ago when it was Southport. And When we moved to our house, there was a pond across the street. I thought it was great. I could make rinks on the pond and have some fun with my kids and whatever. And then a golf course came along, and some of us said, yay, that's great. And then other people said, I don't want pesticides being blown into my neighborhood. And then our street was a nice little quaint street, and then one day they had an extension. And a bunch of us kind of went up against that, and that happened. And then there was a bunch of townhouses built at the end of the four-way stop. And none of us knew that was, or we weren't informed, or we didn't get informed about that. And then the garden home development happened. And then along the way, Stratford, Southport became Stratford. And so it just seemed, since we've lived here, my wife and myself and our family, there's been a lot of changes. And some I agreed with, some I didn't agree with. I did not meet with one counselor. I wish I would have, because it would have really helped in the process. Then they joined my road to another road, Greensview Drive to Outpost Drive, and I wanted to know the reason. So I went to ask the two counselors, and the two counselors for Ward 1 lived in Ward 3. And not knocking those counselors, because they're awesome counselors, but just that's what happened. And so I thought maybe I'll run in Ward 1, and I didn't tell my wife the first 4 days, because I was pretty scared to do that. And then eventually I changed my mind, and I told her. But I guess the reason I wanted to talk for a second here is perspective. And we all here, we want the best for our neighborhood. We want the best for Stratford, and that's exactly what counselors are. And first, counselors are like, we're you. Like, I'm not part of a machine. I'm Gordy who makes rinks out in the pond, and I'm Gordy who's a teacher, and same as the rest of the counselors. We all have lived, I mean, I think Jill's lived here the longest, and she lived here since a baby, so, but we want the best, and we do want you to come and talk to us, like, get a hold of us, like, send us an email, whatever we can do to help. We want the same as you. We don't want things to be put in Stratford that aren't what Stratford is. And it's important that we hear your voice and we hear what your concerns are. And this is a very important process tonight. And I kudos to you, because nobody got really, really upset yet. And but I just want to say, please reach out to all of us, because this is how we as Stratford get better. And I look forward to hearing from everybody here. And very last note, there was a thing on visual media. I can't say the name of the program, but it really upset me when I watched that program, the way we were sort of portrayed. I just want you to know that we follow a process, and this is what we're talking about here, and it's very important for that process. And I guess the reason I wanted to come up was if you could explain, like, the 5 main things we talked about today, about when you first apply, how it goes, just because, or just allude to kind of thing, how when you first apply, you look at the application, and then how we have to go through that until we get to where.
Yeah, okay, sir. Yeah, I took me a second, Counselor, to understand what you're asking.
So basically, planning staff receive an application. The application is reviewed to make sure all the information is there that we need to have to review it. Once we review it, then we go through the whole situation of what it is that's being submitted for. Is it in the correct zone? Does it meet the requirements of the bylaw? All factors like that. Once that's determined, then we take what we have for an application and any plans that accompany it, and we make a recommendation in our report to the planning committee. We present that document and the accompanying material to the planning committee. We discuss it at that level. Planning board makes a decision whether they want more information and defer it, or if they want to go ahead with what it is there and either make their own recommendation with additional comments in it, or follow the staff's recommendation with the conditions on it as well. Regardless, the process then goes to some point to council by way of resolution with a recommendation from the planning committee. Council reviews that, talks about it, and makes a decision as to what the next steps is, whether it's going to be approved, to deny, or they can defer it as well for more information. So that's generally the framework that we use, or that is used, I should say.
Thank you, Mr. McKeegan. Thanks, Councillor Cox, for the question.
I have one final question, if you allow me.
Okay, I see, okay, just, I'll get you to pause 1 second. So I see somebody here who has not spoken yet, then we have Mr. Jackson in the back, then we'll get you, sir, okay? All right?
Hi, Sarah Kennedy, 14 Cable Cord. I'll try to be quick. I don't think my opinion is going to be a popular one. I work in Stratford and I have a good paying job. I should have the right to live here too. Quite frankly, I'd love the option to live in a detached ADU on my mom's property, and I'm sure it's a popular request. Another ideal option for me would be for a small lot with a small house or a townhouse in a quiet neighborhood outside of the core area. Not everybody wants to live in an apartment. The core area, which, let's be honest, is incredibly valuable land and likely won't ever see medium density residential development. I would also actually prefer a prefabricated or modular construction over stick built, since these homes are typically built and inspected in a controlled environment and guarantees a level of craftsmanship. I can think of quite a few out of character properties among traditionally built houses that only add to the character of the neighborhoods. There are retrofitted shipping container houses, log cabins, modern, flat, or mono-sloped roof homes. There's even mini mansions in cottage areas. Every time a new draft of this plan is presented, there's a new neighborhood coming out, and the plan is even more watered down than the one before it. The truth is, sometimes we need to give things a chance, and elected officials need to be brave. If they weren't, Stonington itself wouldn't have been built. The rezoning for that subdivision was almost denied because large lot owners in the surrounding area thought it would hurt their property values, which obviously that hasn't happened and likely won't happen. I just hope future revisions keep barriers to housing in mind and are used sparingly and targeted rather than a zone requirement. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, so Mr. Jackson, you had your hand there, and then Mr. McKim will get you.
Joey Jackson, this time, Mount Harbour Road. I do appreciate what Ms. Kennedy said, and it was kind of the essence of my comments earlier around housing types, and they all should have been considered in this process, I think. And it's unfortunate they're not, and I wish, maybe the next iteration of this, they will be in places where it makes sense. One question I had, and it was, I guess I'm kind of wondering why it fell on deaf ears, and it may sound like a broken record, but I'm not being negative. Behind Strawberry Hill, St. Catharines area, there's a RN, I think, now in there. Yep, thank you. And the area off Duffy Road, there was a very passionate plea from the gentleman, I think, that lived just adjacent to that property outside the town, who was worried about water issues last time. And so I guess understanding that is part of the town, that became part of, when the campus happened, why couldn't that just be in a single family, instead of that one will be, I think according to my notes, I think it's 4 units as a duplex as a right and up to 4 special permitted. That's a lot, especially when there are concerns there about water. And it is, I understand with Strawberry Hill, there's some stipulations in there around it where it abuts current lots. But I still think this is probably the 4th time that this area has been brought up. Looking back to when the former mayor was here, there's a lot of folks that expressed discontent around rezoning this. I know this would be the preference of probably the landowner there to do this, but I'm just wondering why that one and off Duffy Road can't just be single family the way it was, and just why wouldn't that kind of resounding feedback we heard from those areas 4 times on St. Catharines and Strawberry Hill, why that can't be left alone? I guess, I guess that's
sure.
Yeah.
So I'll turn it to Mr. Watson, and I think there's just 2 elements that I'd like Mr. Watson to address about the maximum permitted semi-detached in the RN zones, and also the rationale for the RN zones in general.
Yeah, if I may, just to kind of flavor that, if the essence of the whole evening is that we're not interrupting residential neighborhoods, that's why Not as much on the Duffy Road side, but that one there, Strawberry Hill, I don't see why that needs to happen there. And the other one for other reasons, but I guess just, the answer to that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So that RN zone has been refined in the most recent draft. The last draft, of course, as I mentioned, does have those transition provisions. So, abutting existing single units, it has to be a single unit. The big change that's happened to the RN in this one is that the number of lots for duplex or townhouse dwellings is capped at 30% of the subdivision. It used to be that in the last draft it was 30%, more than 30% had to go to council. Now it's just hard capped. So that does limit the intensity of what would possibly go in on any of these RN zones. The drainage pieces, so drainage would be looked at as part of the subdivision application. That's a requirement for a drainage plan. I think just in the, and this kind of builds on other questions about other areas. Again, that one of the key thrusts we heard is don't touch, don't allow someone to come and take one of these lots and put 2 units on it. We don't want to see change in those existing developed neighborhoods. So we've looked for those areas that are still unsubdivided, that will be new neighborhoods, and allowed for a little bit of intensification on them to kind of take the pressure off these other areas at the end of the day.
And that's fair. And I hope that is kind of tempered with the feeling of the folks in those areas. The last thing, I guess, is great to hear from Councillor Cox around being taken back by the stories around that. I think it would go a long ways for the town or council to correct that publicly rather than just having it be retracted. Being that there were 2 instances, there were some fairly strong things said by the developer in that around the town's lack of saying no, I guess, and that really, it should take us all back. So if everyone feels that way, and I understand, I appreciate Councillor Cox saying that, it would be nice if not for this process, but for the upcoming election or anything that's out there, have an understanding where the town actually is on this, so that people know if it's not a done deal, that's great. And we're not talking about anything specific, but I think it's important for folks to know because it got a lot of us all riled up. Hearing that it could happen in any one of these areas kind of is another wrinkle that should probably be clarified with staff. But it would be appreciated if somebody, at least from the council side, but maybe staff understand. Theoretically makes a lot of sense, but if you could do that, it'd be great. Thanks.
Yes, thanks, sir. And sir, you were looking to follow up. Yep.
Bert McKinnon, Falcon Avenue. Just on the, just a point of clarity on one question, that was, I think I heard you say on major developments there wouldn't be any public input because it would be difficult to deal with development if there was a requirement of such like that going forward. Is that, have I got that wrong, or are we referring to something else?
Okay, I think you're right. I just want to make sure. So when we're talking about major development, you mean like a major subdivision? I just want to.
Yeah. So for example, I think that was the word that was used, major subdivision.
All right.
So if there is a major subdivision, is it something that the public are not participating in, or is it just a case of coming to the planning board and the council? Is that how it works, or?
I'll Mr. Watson, you look ready to go, so yeah.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Chair. So there are certain classes of development, like major developments, subdivisions over 5 lots that would come to planning committee and would be public facing process. It's a decision that's made around the table and it's a public facing process. But the processes where there's actual public involvement, where there would be a hearing like this, or those are typically reserved for situations where you're doing something different than what the bylaw allows. Either you're asking for a variance or a change to the bylaw, or a special permitted use. So that's when the public the public actual involvement in the process comes in. Those other ones where it's where the rules are set out, and it's a question of whether they meet the rules or not, and that's really up to the development officer or planning committee to determine.
Absolutely, and I just want to, it was a great answer, I just want to follow up on that, and I'll give you some of the rationale as to why, right? I mean, as members of the public, I think we're very in tune if somebody wants to change the proposed use of a land, right? I mean, say if I'm living in an RL zone and all of a sudden my neighbor wants to zone it to commercial. You know, they want to put in like a metal foundry or something like that right next door. Like that's obviously going to be something I have a real concern about, right? And I should get some notification about that.
Yeah.
But if, like, say we have a big swath of RL, like undeveloped, our low density residential zone, and somebody just wants to subdivide that, the use isn't changing, right? We can expect and understand that land is still going to be used for low density residential land. And we almost presume and expect that land is going to be subdivided because, you know, for instance, this is a pure hypothetical. You'll see right below Fox Meadow Golf Course, there's a single chunk of land there that's owned RL, okay? It wouldn't make a lot of sense for me to build one house right in the middle of that, right? So people assume that that's going to be subdivided. But people also assume that use isn't going to change. That's going to be homes in there, for instance, right? So I can have a certain amount of comfort to say, well, of course there's going to be more homes than one in there, but they're going to be homes. I have much more of a concern, I imagine, if somebody says, I want to put in like a meat rendering plant in there and, you know, or whatever, you know, like, I mean, I'm using extreme examples to show you why, I guess, if that makes sense.
No, I understand what you're saying. I mean, if the bylaws allows things to happen, then it has to go through the process. But I'm just, anyway, no, okay, I'll leave that. The second one is kind of like a macro question, and that is, I've always had this on my mind about Stratford. It's grown so fast, so rapidly in the last bunch of years. Has there ever been any work done on the actual, the demand on the water resource, and also demand on the, I know the sewage has been sorted, it's going across the bridge and all that kind of stuff, but, you know, in our area, you can see by the size of the town now and the developments that are there that could happen. Has anybody ever figured that out as far as the implications of demand on water as a resource and also on sewage treatment and that kind of thing? So
yeah,
just throw that out there.
Sure. And my gosh, I'm sorry, I'm losing track, but somebody had asked, I think in the realm of bylaw enforcement. So I'll say the same thing, is that, you know, development and infrastructure to support development, they go hand in hand. It's something that's not in an official plan as such, other than to suggest that, you know, we have an obligation as a municipality to provide, you know, the utilities that people at a minimum are paying for. Right now in Stratford, not every lot's a serviced lot, for instance. Not every resident in Stratford has water and sewer. You know, the ones who are connected to the utility pay for that service, for instance, and that's always something we're mindful of. And I can tell you, certainly during my tenure here on council, we've made some significant investments to water infrastructure and sewer infrastructure, and that's just our business as a municipality. And irrespective of what's going on in terms of development, that's something that we always have to keep in mind. And part of it, now, and maybe I'll turn it over to Mr. Watson, is that's why we're de-emphasizing the R1L zone, which was at a time when most of our lots were unserviced, for instance, and you had a certain lot size to accommodate septic systems, which we're getting away from. But I'll just turn it over to you on that basis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, that question around servicing is a huge, it underlies everything. You know, the water's got to come from somewhere and it's got to go somewhere. The town actually, before starting this official plan process, did undertake a growth management strategy, commissioned a growth management strategy to look at current capacities and, you know, how much density that could support. And in general, we're within that, I would say. There are, you know, there might be areas where you need to upgrade a connection or have a new lift station or something like that. But when we were drawing these maps, thinking back to that growth management strategy and what's possible to accommodate. And whenever someone comes in for a rezoning, for example, to change the use of the land, to change the density, to say, I want to change this RL to high density, one of the things to look at is, okay, this is new, this is different than what we planned for. How would this affect services? And if it could be a valid reason to turn that down if services were going to be impacted. Yeah. But yeah, as Councillor McDonald said, one of the big changes has been through this plan is a push towards service development and away from on-site services, because this is a town, it's a growing town, and there's only so much land in it, And so the large lot area that's required for on-site services just really isn't compatible with that for the, in the future.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, please. Yeah.
And yeah, you would notice from the zone map is that the lands that are zoned for residential of some kind are those lands that are currently connected or within vicinity of connections and services. The purple land that you'll see is all the agricultural land. So what we did in the official plan is that we limited the change to agricultural land based on when and how fast the core area is developed. So until that core area is over 75% complete, the agricultural land would be very difficult for us to receive applications for changing that. So we are stipulating things that do protect the agricultural land for as long as possible. And so that growth will be incremental as and when the core areas get developed.
Okay. I just do want to limit it to people at this point who have not spoken yet. I see 1, 2. Okay, we've got a few. I'm going to go from front to back, okay? So, ma'am, you come on up and identify yourself, and then we'll go from there.
My name's Janice McKinnon from Falcon Avenue. Mine's kind of a long-term question, but I'm just wondering, you were talking about water and whatnot resources. You're speaking a lot tonight about high-density residential. I'm wondering what consideration has been given to access. A lot of people that live in Stratford work in Charlottetown or downtown or at the hospital. Like I've heard different people comment about, what about the bridge? Sometimes there's long lineups, particularly in the evening, coming back to Stratford, and just curious as to, the infrastructure and access from Stratford, if Stratford is going to continue to grow as a community.
Yep, perfectly valid, right? I mean, I think we all want to think about that, because unchecked or unregulated growth without the corresponding infrastructure support, it doesn't do anybody good. It just leads to a lot of frustration in a city or a town that doesn't work. I'm not going to pass the buck here and just simply say that the province owns the roads in this municipality. Although that is the reality, it is. And typically how we construct new roads to add to the network is that's the condition of development. And that's usually sometimes a strategic component of us approving certain developments, is to expand necessary resources such as utility, infrastructure, as well as road work. Look, I'll go one step further. I mean, certainly traffic is a big concern for everybody in the municipality, right? We all want a smooth ride everywhere we go. We don't want to be waiting. We're all busy enough. But there's also the notion of schools, right? There's also the notion of, utilities that we've already discussed. There's the notion of adequate recreational facilities. We're a growing municipality, and that's an exciting thing. We rely on our provincial partners to assist us with this, and our federal partners, and I think we do a very good job in Stratford, to be honest with you, of taking advantage of working with our partners on the federal and provincial side to increase our services. But there is a lag. There can be no doubt, Ms. McKinnon, in the form of usually sometimes development comes first, population increases, and that is the justification for the province or the federal governments to provide us with the resources that we need as a municipality to provide the services that our citizens need. So there is a bit of a rubber banding. There can be no doubt. In a perfect world, we would have the resources to devote to these things on the front end, building them in the anticipation that people will come. And certainly, as a municipality, I'm really mindful and focused on the fact that my control or my sphere of influence extends to really what we're talking about here, zoning and development, right? We can create, as our discussion with this chair said, the conditions that hopefully are ripe for development, and then that will hopefully fuel the growth in the services that we need. It is something we think about. As Mr. Watson said, they're all things that we need to consider, and we do consider them, and a frequent objection to new development is traffic. And certainly that sometimes that has carried the day, to be honest with you. But there is certainly a lag there that can occur between development first and then, unfortunately, services hopefully following very shortly thereafter, if that makes sense.
Has there been any discussion with the province as to
always
increase in
Always.
Access from Charlottetown to Stratford.
I can say, and Mayor Ogden can certainly attest to this, is that there is a constant dialogue between Stratford's elected officials on the provincial side. They have offices here within our town hall. We have a good relationship with them. They're aware of the needs of Stratford. They have to balance that against the needs of the rest of this province. And we are very vocal with them about the requirements for this municipality to reach its potential. They're great partners. We have a high school currently under construction. We've got a commitment for a junior high school. We are seeing growth, right? We are seeing it. It doesn't happen all at once, though, that's for sure. Yes.
I guess I'm just wondering what the responsibility of the town is.
Excuse me, I need you to use the microphone,
Oh,
please, for
sorry.
the live stream. Sorry. Thank you.
No, I'm just wondering what the responsibility is of the town to continue to grow and relying on the province or the federal government for the financials to meet the other kinds of needs for the town.
Our responsibility is to use our resources as best we possibly can to apply really, it's fundamental of economics. We're applying, scarce resources to infinite and competing wants and needs, right? And so it's a balancing exercise each and every year when we do our budget and we do our 5-year capital budgeting. The discussions are excellent. They're lively. It's part of the best part about being a councillor, because it is exciting, but it is very difficult. And it's something that's constantly happening. Yeah.
Can I add something in too?
Sure.
Yeah, sorry to belabor the point here as well, Mr. Chair, but I think it ties back to the planning documents, and the importance of having these planning documents is that they also set out a blueprint a little bit for the decision makers, that the people who hold the purse strings, we can go to them and say, hey, we've set up, these lands that allow greater density. You need to plan for this in the money that we get to build infrastructure. The alternative, where we zone everything the way it is now and applications come one by one for rezoning and they're each looked at, that can be really hard to plan ahead for some of those big infrastructure decisions. So, when people ask about, well, why have we increased, density potential on some of these areas, part of it's realistic about knowing that the demand is coming, and it's better to be ahead of it and know where that growth is going to go so that we can make informed decisions about infrastructure.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, and also I just iterate, like, the way that changing commercial to a more mixed use makes that land more versatile for smaller businesses to be able to open up, right? A lot of the times in commercial zones, it's very much focused on a bigger box, bigger entity. Whereas when you get the mixed use zones, you're getting 4 or 5 businesses or young professionals or people starting up their own shingle can go into those units. And I think that is the good thing about the mixed use, is that we're providing those additional units for people to start opening their businesses within Stratford, right? So we have a good connection to trail systems. So we have a good, all those trails go into the core area, and the business park is expanding as well. So there's just a lot more opportunities for Stratford residents to open up their own businesses or even pull those Charlottetown offices back into Stratford. And that does have an impact on reducing traffic and transport across the bridge as well.
Okay. Sir, next. Yeah, I believe you were next, yeah.
Try not to get too close to this thing. I don't want to sound like I've got it inside my mouth. We've discussed a lot of things tonight.
And I apologize, sir. I hate to ask, but I'll just get your name and
oh, sorry. My name is Nathan Schoenfeld. I live on Harlan View Drive. We're talking about a lot of density, and the words housing crisis has come up, of mobile housing, modular housing, soft density, hard density, heavy density. It looks a lot like there's a lot more people coming into Stratford than what we have right now. For what I can see is, for every 5 people, we're projected to have, 7? we've talked about services, and we've also talked about City Council's desire to see the best community that we can and deliver the best services possible. When are we going to get a doctor's office?
Well, I can tell you the lands are zoned for them in certain areas, and that's up to them. I can tell you Murphy's Pharmacy has doctor's offices. Are you looking for, like, I guess, more, I guess, would be the...
Of a full-time medical services clinic, for example. I know we have Murphy's Pharmacy, but it only operates 2 hours a week. That's advertising. It's not really a service. Is there a dialogue with the provincial government to partner with them to get a fully funded medical clinic here in Stratford? Like, we're going to have a population explosion, and we have no means of taking care of everybody's health. We had a lady here with mobility issues. I'm pretty sure everyone here has sat in a doctor's office at one point or another, had to drive across the bridge and find a clinic. So, is that a thing that we've discussed? I don't think anybody's touched on that yet today.
Sure. Look, I'm not trying to pass the buck or anything like that, but I mean, it's not really germane to zoning and development, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
And I'm cognizant that it's 8:20 in the evening, and here's what I'll say is that it's certainly an ongoing discussion with the province to try to locate. I'm sure you've heard in the news about medical homes and things of that nature, and certainly I think many municipalities are in discussions with the province about bringing such a facility to their municipalities. But I am focused on the time, sir, and I'm very mindful of the fact that I'm trying to get through comments that people might have with respect to the official plan and zoning development bylaw. I don't take issue with the question, but I'm just trying to keep us focused as best we can.
Just figured I'd float it out there.
Yeah, 100%. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hello, I'm Ross Wheatley. I'm a resident on Falcon Avenue, and I've been kind of listening here to this dialogue all evening and for months now, I guess, for a long time, and I do applaud the town and the planners for the work they've done. I think they've come a long way from where they started. I think there's been a lot of feedback, and it's been a very involved process. I mean, I do think there could be more dialogue, obviously with residents. There's probably never enough, but my question is around something that was talked a bit tonight, brought up by several people, around the fact that we don't impose things like architectural guidelines, I guess, on residential construction. I know I think as a town, when we do commercial development, there is a fairly involved review process. And architecturally, I totally understand. I'm an engineer. I've spent my whole life working in this stuff. And I understand the fact that it's not an easy thing to regulate. I wouldn't want to be the guy sitting there having to figure it out, but it's a tough thing to do because you're trying to balance a lot of different priorities for the town. You're not trying to put unnecessary limits on what people can do, and it does affect the surrounding neighborhoods, the valuations of the properties, and this sort of stuff. But I do question that at this point in time, as a town, that we probably should start to think about it. The reason I say that is construction has changed a lot. And historically, I don't think you really had to do a lot in that regard. Development came. The lot sizes were very consistent for a long period of time. And we are seeing this desire for greater density, which I don't disagree with entirely. I'm not really a fan of the increased density we're seeing in the residential low density. It's increasing, but beside that, I do think I think the way the industry is changing, and I see this in other facets of construction where the modularization and that sort of thing, I think there's bylaws in the town around this that dictate that we have to follow CSA standards and whatnot. That kind of puts a rough box around the requirements. There's guardrails there, but they're not that tight. And I'm not saying that they need to be too tight, but I do think it's time that this group, I think this is the right group to do it, that they should start to think about trying to get some guidelines in there, because some of the stuff I'm seeing coming from all over the world, there's a lot of good products out there. You don't want to stop innovation and that sort of thing, but I do think that there's a lot of value in proven time techniques and construction methods and all this sort of stuff. And what you don't want to see happen is to see a degradation in the caliber of the subdivisions due to durability, weathering, all this sort of stuff. You know, size of buildings probably. I don't know how you kind of regulate that, but I do think it's something. I don't know if you've put it on your agenda. I know it hasn't been talked about through this here updating of the bylaws and stuff, but I think it's time that maybe it's something that should be considered, so that going forward you do have, a lot of people have this concern. You know, we're seeing it in the neighborhood, everybody's talking about it. So I just kind of wanted to put it out there to see, is that something that, I know you purposely don't want to go down that road, but I kind of think it might be, you're going to see a lot of stuff come across your desk if you don't get some guardrails up. That's all I'm saying.
I agree completely with what you're saying. I think there's probably some oversight that can be exercised in that regard. We have to talk about it, what that looks like, if it's possible. There may be legal constraints about that, I'll be honest with you. And, you know, Mr. Carnell mentioned this in an unrelated but somewhat related comment, is that character can happen organically, and it can happen in ways that we don't fully anticipate. And some things that may not be, for instance, for you and I,
I agree.
copacetic on something, it's built, and then all of a sudden it becomes part of that character. And so these things, because of that very nature, can be difficult to regulate. That being said, there have been developments of late that speak to perhaps the need for some oversight. There can be no doubt. And so I agree with what you're saying. I think, you know, I can say with some measure that it's certainly something that's been discussed between councillors, and so it's certainly something we're going to try to look at least. And I can at least.
My fear is that if it doesn't happen in this round of, you know, update, that it gets set aside for 5 years, and, you know.
Yeah.
You know.
For sure. The time is now.
Now's the time.
Now's the time.
It's after 8 o'clock,
Yeah.
but I said it wasn't until 8. But
yeah. But what does that look like?
Better late than never.
Yeah. But what does that look like? So that. But I think Mr. McKeegan wants to just add something to that.
I wanted to address your concern with the architectural standards. We do have architectural standards in the urban core and the CMU, because it's a form-based zoning. So we have the whole gamut of architectural standards for those two zones. We haven't gone beyond those yet, but there has been discussion that maybe the form-based codes is a way to introduce it in other areas as well. So I do understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But I just want to be clear that we do currently have architectural
No,
standards.
I know you do, and I knew there was in the core, and I see it. I mean, I've
Yes.
seen it, and it's like now is the time we should be starting to think about extending that area.
Yes.
You don't want to be too, you know, prohibitive.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you need to look after. You're looking after the people that are going to be living in these residences.
Right.
That's the reality, and the adjoining properties.
And
right?
it's
So
it's a very delicate balance with architectural
I know,
standards,
I know.
because it does raise the price a lot of time on who can afford those things, and then they become rentals, they become exorbitant.
there's ways to do it. I think
There is a balance.
Yeah, there's a balance there,
Yeah.
for sure. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chance, Councillor.
Spencer McDonald, 85 Stratford Road. For the minutes, I'm excited to hear there's some amenities, some thoughts going into that. My concern here now is my family and my young kids, and making sure that you said there's a rubber band, and I just want to speak to that comment, that we're ensuring that we're looking at the schools. Whenever I started school here, I grew up here. Whenever I started school here, my first day of school was in one of those mobile units, and I just want to make sure my kids are looked after and ensure that that's something going forward we're always planning for. But I have a question as well for the historic properties. There was a mention of the alignment with the provincial standards, so I just want to see what that includes and what there will be requirements, because I think there's only so many properties that are historic property, maybe 12 in Stratford, and a lot of them I don't believe are designated. Most are registered, so I'm not sure what that would look like for development if someone was to purchase those and see what happens with them going forward.
Mr. Wash, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I can jump in on that, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Previous drafts of the bylaw essentially had a procedure in them for alteration of heritage properties, and that would come to the municipality's heritage committee. The reality is the municipality does not have the authority over those. It is a provincial. The minister is responsible for approving alterations to heritage properties. So that is the change that has been made, is essentially to remove any suggestion that the municipality has authority over that, and then that it would actually go to the minister for approvals.
You can actually reach out to the province. They are looking at revising their document. I don't know when it's going to be fully completed, but the manager there is looking at how housing and buildings are registered under their policy, because they have some inconsistencies in their own regulations, and so they're looking nationally to how to better achieve that. So,
okay. So any restrictions on my property would be provincial.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I wanted to mention that with the density, the increased density, it's my concern as well is the increased traffic and making sure that there's lots of pathways for crossing roads, ensure that it's a safe route for all of our children going around the subdivisions as well. So I just want to put that out there for the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. I absolutely share your concerns in that regard. Okay, I believe Councillor Chandler, you had your hand up.
Hi, my name is Jill Chandler, and I am a councillor in Ward 2. And as Councillor Cox mentioned, I was born and raised in the town of Stratford. It was then Southport. My parents still live here. I'm very invested in the community as a councillor, as a resident, as a parent. I want you to know, as Councillor Cox said, we do take your feedback very importantly. When I signed up and campaigned to run for council, I didn't have a platform, I didn't have a vision. I had a desire to service residents and advocate on behalf of residents, and I think all of us do our best to do that. So what I would like you to know is that we do listen, we appreciate your level of engagement, your care of our town. It's been interesting for me to navigate these processes because there is the passion, there is the opinion, and then of course there is the legislation that guides the decisions. And sometimes there is a lack of understanding, I guess, sometimes in how those things work, in that there's permitted uses, permitted zones, etc., that just happen, and that's the way it is. So even if we might be opposed, that's within our bylaws that can happen. I do want to clarify one thing, just for perception, and that is that you had asked about planning processes and the applications and planning committee and all that sort of stuff, and that is an excellent description of how it all works. But I do want to clarify that not every application comes before council. So if an application comes to the town that is within the permitted use or a slight whatever, and the town staff that it meets and checks the boxes, then that type of decision does not come before council, and I have not voted on it because it met the criteria within the existing guidelines. So I just wanted to clarify that because I think it's important, and as we go forward, and I think there were some great points brought up tonight, and I appreciate everyone's feedback. And for reference, I did do a quick scan, and I can see that there are many jurisdictions across Canada that do have some pretty specific criteria in their lot sizes, setbacks, floor plans, etc. So thank you, and thanks to everyone for coming tonight. We do appreciate your presence.
Thank you. Okay, I'm mindful of the time. I will ask for if there are any people who have not spoken yet. Yes, sir.
Wilf McDonald, T Hill, I call it, but Bornystone Lane is where I live. I guess really we're sitting here scratching our head, and I think the big question is, when is this going to be done? I think timing is critical. We're not going to please everybody. There's going to be things that everybody doesn't like. I think living in the community as long as I have and knowing a lot of people in the community, density has been a hot topic, and I guess from my point of view, density for a new area that's being developed, yeah, that's fair ball. I guess the other piece that hasn't been talked about is the areas that we should be considering expanding to. Hazelbrook, Alexandra, Mermaid, these areas are utilizing a lot of the services of the town, and if we're looking for an opportunity for growth, I think we should be considering that, or at least, talking to our two MLAs and say, okay, it's time. It's time to move that way. And I guess the other piece that we're facing is we've got a new campus with a lot of facilities going in there. We've got a high school opening next year, junior high, hopefully that's coming. Movement of, say, soccer fields, cricket, to the new campus. And I think the important part here is it's on the outskirts of our community. I think the opportunity should be made to expand our boundaries and look at bringing those people in under the fold. I think that's an opportunity, and I'm glad somebody else mentioned the need for infrastructure. Every time I come, I still think we need a new bridge, so I'll leave it on that. Thank you.
So I'll ask Mr. Carnell to speak to the timeline. Don't want to put you on the spot, but it's a great question. Where are we going and how are we getting there? So I think, Mr. McDonald, I'll just ask Mr. Carnell to speak to that. Yeah, well, don't disagree.
Well, after tonight, we'll take out the comments and look at the comments, but we're planning to bring this document for planning board review this coming Monday, and then hopefully to town council the week after for the first reading, and then we'll have to look at a special council meeting to do the second reading and the adoption.
Okay. Do you want to speak to this? Or?
I just want to make one point further to Scott. Even though the town will adopt it eventually, it still has to go to the minister of the province for final approval, so there could be a little time lag there as well, just so you know the full picture.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. McKeegan. Okay, I'm moving now to review some of our online comments that were received. We have a few, so I'll be very brief. Okay. So we have one online comment from Rachel Colwell on Tulip Crescent, who fully supports the suggestion that there be consideration given to maintaining the broad architectural character of existing neighborhoods. Second comment this is more of a question. So I'll read the question and then I'll ask actually Mr. Watson to address it. It's from Chad Gallant at Birchwoods Lane. Federal Minister Robertson's July 20th letter specifically identifies ADUs in low-density areas as one of Stratford's outstanding HAF Housing Accelerator Fund commitments. Stratford agreed to permit ADUs on low-density residential lots, but the HAF commitment does not appear to require an ADU to also be permitted with a double dwelling. Why has the town chosen to allow a double dwelling in the RL zone to also have an ADU, potentially creating 3 dwelling units on lower density property, essentially a stacked townhouse not permitted in RL zones? Would council consider limiting ADUs in the RL zone to single dwellings, or does the federal HAF funds restrict this? So, Mr. Watson, I'm not going to ask you to speak to the HAF agreement, but what I will ask you to speak to is the specifics as it relates to the ADUs and the amendments that have been made to the most recent draft.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So previous drafts actually did not restrict it to singles or doubles. It was townhouses could have them, stacked townhouses. The most recent draft does pare that back to just singles or just doubles. They're one of those, it's one of those things that from a planning perspective is reasonable in the sense that they are ground-oriented buildings. The potential for disruption is lower there, and it feels like a good fit, I think, in terms of enabling this use without enabling it too much, having some opportunities for it without going too far at the same time.
It's still only on one lot. It's not on the double door. You can't have 2.
Yeah, correct.
The lot has to be subdivided on a double unit. So it's not 3 units on one lot. It's still only limited to a house, whether it be the side of a semi-detached unit or the single and the only one ADU.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you. All right, I'll just indicate we did receive one form of written correspondence, but it's from Ms. Jenkins, who did speak, and her comments are already captured in the record. So I won't read that correspondence. I'll just inform everybody of our next steps. As Mr. Carnell has indicated, project team is going to take the comments heard this evening into consideration when finalizing the draft documents. They're going to be presented at the Planning, Heritage, and Development Committee meeting on August 31st, 2026 at noon. Planning Board will meet for discussion, make a recommendation to Council. Council will meet on September the 9th to deliberate on the resolution and for potential adoption of the official plan and zoning development bylaw. Should they pass for the first reading on that date, then there will be a special town council meeting to be scheduled for the potential second reading and adoption of that new official plan and zoning and development bylaw. I want to thank sincerely everybody for their participation here, not just this evening, but throughout this entire process. I've seen throughout this process a number of very familiar faces at each and every one of these planning committee meetings, as well as official plan meetings, as well as public meetings, many online comments. Your participation is completely invaluable. It is the lifeblood of democracy, and I say that with full sincerity, in that this is your town, and these documents are designed not to reflect mine or staff's wishes as your elected officials, but yours, with the balancing that we were required to do amongst many competing viewpoints. So again, sincere thanks to all of you for your participation throughout this, and with that, I will now adjourn these proceedings. Thank you.